morning. You got me up all cause you need to talk. Till 4 in the evening. Wanna break up, say that you've had enough. I'm tired of talking, again and again. Argue about everything. You are my darling. Let's kiss and make up, I know you wanna touch. You call me every night, call me every day. I just wanna get you alone now. Trust me when I say, we gon' be okay. We just gotta boom, bada boom, ba. I don't wanna fight, you know that I'm right. Baby, let me talk to your body. We gon' be okay, hear me when I say.
Are you a mister? Mister, often in the lexicon of the Americans, was often more or less demonized by famous feminists as being a violent and very dangerous man. But the question that I want to pose to the public on tonight is, was Mr. more or less suffering from undiagnosed mental illness? Could that mental illness have been post-traumatic stress disorder? Why is it that often in the contextual framework of America that many men, especially those of color, are often seen as dangerous and violent men? But we never take into consideration that Mr., like so many men in this country, have been more or less been products of vicarious trauma when they more or less saw their dads suffer with undiagnosed mental illness and placed that mental illness on his mother, which in essence caused that man to do the same thing. I told you in the past that a hopeless man is a broken man, and a broken man is a dangerous man. Mr., as I said in the past, was more or less seen as a negative iconoclast, an iconoclast that often is demonized by feminists. The essence of this show is to more or less explore all the elements associated with Mr. Was Mr. actually a bad and violent man? Or was Mr. once again suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder or some other undiagnosed mental illness? Are you a Mr.? You decide. And remember this, if it ain't 7, it ain't kosher. If it ain't kosher, it ain't right. There are 7 steps that a man must go through in order to become an optimized male. Male mental health and male physical health is paramount to the efficacy of a man, and if that man is more or less broken, he can never be the best version of himself. Be well. All right, guys, can you hear me? Testing, testing, mic check, testing, testing. All right. Dr. O, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, Mark. Listen, guys, I apologize for that technicality, but this is going to be an interesting topic. And we're going to be talking about the mistering of the American black man. Mark, you know and I know that Mr. was often seen as a very negative icon to many. But the question that I'm going to pose to the audience on tonight is, was Mr. a byproduct of vicarious trauma? Mark, I want you to introduce yourself and tell the audience who you are, and tell them why you wrote the book that you wrote as it relates to trauma and the impact on black men and black families.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. My name is Mark Montplaisir. I am the author of Strong Women, Fed Up Men, Defeated Sons, Broken Daughters, Healing Generational Pain. So I decided to write this book because of, the history that we have as black people, starting from slavery, where, we never really healed from it. Right. A lot of us don't even understand it. The history. A lot of us don't even know when we are still practicing some of the trauma, some of the patterns and traditions that have been passed down to us from generations, from our ancestors, and in the ways that we love each other, in the ways that we raise our children. So a lot of us, especially about the topic tonight, which is very, very, very important, because a lot of black men, when it comes to mental health, it's not something that we were taught to even think about.
Right.
And as a black man, especially, you had to, project this sense of masculinity that was never really healthy to begin with, because again, not understanding what it means for a lot of us, it means, being aggressive. It means, not showing emotions. You know what I'm saying? So I decided to write the book to kind of, help people become aware of some of those negative patterns and traditions that, we were passed down from slavery, and that, again, we are still using today.
Right, and I'm glad to have you here, Mark. It's urgent that we have these conversations about these topics, because as I said in the past, we can talk about money, we can talk about the law, we can talk about family court, we can talk about health, but if the mind is disturbed, then everything else is off kilter. And often Mr. is seen as the negative icon in America for a lot of black men that more or less was said to oppress our women. And I've always said, that men and women, black men and black women, were both beasts of the same burden. And so, I chose Mr. because the topic was more or less going to address leave Mr. alone, because Mr. himself was a byproduct of trauma. Based on your discussion, Mark, on what you've seen, how relevant would you say trauma is as it relates to, black men? And based on the findings in your book, how often do you see it?
Oh, absolutely. It's actually very, very relevant. But personally, as a black man in America, even now, if I'm driving and I hear sirens, right, I get anxious. You know what I'm saying? So we are pretty much living and breathing trauma daily in this country, and even in other black African descent countries, right? Because we are dealing with insecurities, we are dealing with the unsafe nature of our communities and our environment. So we are pretty much living trauma and surviving. You know what I'm saying? So being aware of again all those aspects of mental health, right? All those aspects of, being beaten and not having, going through the system is, here again, the system of not feeling safe and not being protected. So trauma is something that we live, through daily. And if we're not aware of them, it can actually take a toll on our health, on our mental health, and on our lives, and even, force us to, mistreat the people that we're supposed to love.
No doubt, and these topics are very important, because I think a lot of times the things that we more or less accuse of being as more or less being toxic masculinity actually is a byproduct of trauma that's been unresolved. And Mark, I think the question poses a lot of times that the behaviors that we saw manifest in our grandfathers, where he was an alcoholic, or he had many women, or he would actually abuse his wife, was often a byproduct of trauma. But while we're on that topic, I want to send a shout out to my man, United Fitness. Thank you, brother. I'm on my bike, ready for the topic. Thank you, brother. I love you guys. And thank you to the audience that is listening. This channel is growing. It's a small channel now, but I'm dedicated to the ones that are listening. Shout out to the young lion before the billions. And we're going to have a topic because many times, Mark, black male trauma and black male pain is minimized and seen as something toxic. But we need to talk about why the behaviors that exist actually exist and how to find resolve around it. Who inspired you, or what inspired you to write this book, Mark?
Well, growing up, I witnessed a lot of dysfunctions, and early on, I knew, they weren't healthy. Right, it wasn't supposed to be that way. So when I got older, started getting into relationships and realizing that, a lot of those relationships weren't healthy. Right, the way that I would interact with, my partners and the way that they would interact with me, just weren't healthy at all. So I decided to change that. And witnessing, my friends growing up, my friends from childhood. Some of them are still in prison. You know what I mean? Because they didn't have healthy patterns to go by. They didn't have parents who could have guided them to not be in a predicament of committing a crime or mistreating someone. You know what I mean? So I decided to change my life. Because I know those things weren't healthy. So I wanted different. I wanted to experience something completely different that was healthy. And the way, I have a daughter as well. The way I wanted to raise my daughter was not to pass down some of the things that I was given, from my parents. So all that, and, working with clients and hearing stories, I knew I had to do something to help change the narrative, help change the culture, help change some of the patterns that we are, not aware of and are still using today. I think we stopped the show. All right, so we are back. We are having some technical difficulties. So there's a question: what things were passed down from slavery that they don't have in Africa? If you don't mind me asking. Well, I mean, so when we look at the mindset that slavery produced, right? When we look at some of the dysfunctions, especially the ways that we love each other, right? So we are uh, one culture, that can actually use derogatory terms and names to call each other as an endearment, to show love to one another. We will use words that are actually derogatory, to refer to each other. That's not healthy. You know what I mean? So having that mindset, I think we have to again be aware of it, and definitely try to change that. So again, when we talk about mental health, uh, it's and I like to take it back to when during slavery, right? When you see a black person, right? We couldn't face the pain and the hurt that we were going through at the time, and even after slavery, it's not something that we could have faced because we still had to fight Jim Crow laws, we still had to fight segregation, so we still had to fight to be free, and to have a life as a human being. And those pain, those hurts, like they don't just disappear, right? They don't go away. So those are things that we have to be mindful of and heal from if we want to move forward.
Right, you're correct. And guys, I apologize for the technical issues. I'm struggle streaming right now. I got all this new equipment, so I apologize for the technical difficulties. But D asks, how can you talk about this topic without speaking about the origin, which is the nature of psychology, the behavior, the pathology of the European? So, what's your take on that, Mark? Because I'm not one to castigate everything on an ethnic group. But there were some radical racists that played a role. But I'm not going to castigate that on all white people. But what's your take on that?
Well, I mean, listen, but this is not about blaming white people or black
Right,
people. It's about
right,
us coming together and heal. That's
right.
the whole purpose. You know what I mean? Although you can't ignore the fact that okay, well, we went through that experience. White people were a part of it. They created it. You know what I'm saying? You can't ignore that. But at the same time, you can't dwell on it because that's not going to help you heal. So once you acknowledge the fact that if you take a parent, if your parent raised you, right, your parents raised you, they weren't healthy, right? They didn't raise you in a healthy way. You can't say, well, my parents, hurt me. I'm not gonna find ways to heal. You know what I'm saying? You are responsible to heal yourself now. If you're an adult, and the same goes with when we look at slavery and white people. You can't blame it on white people and say, well, you're not gonna change. It's not about that. It's about us coming together and being aware of the history and understanding it, and then find ways to heal and move forward in a healthy way and start again creating healthier and better communities.
No doubt. To the guys that are listening, please like, share, and subscribe to content. We're trying to get it to 2,000, and I'm loving what we're trying to do here because, as I said earlier, mental health is important. Also, Mark, let me ask you a question. Why do you think that black male or male mental health, because it's not just a black man thing, but male mental health, it's often marginalized in America? Why is it marginalized, Mark?
Well, I mean, we look at we look at men really overall as a sign of strength, right? As a symbol of strength,
Right.
and because of that, if a man says, I'm hurting emotionally, especially in our community, other men will make fun of him,
Right.
right? So I think again the stigma that goes with even therapy, it's unhealthy because we're not helping each other, right? And having this false understanding of masculinity is really unhealthy. And I remember when I first came here in 1999, and black boys were saying how hard they were, how tough they were, but those boys were hurting. You know what I'm saying? So we use the pain as strength. We use it to hurt each other. But there's nothing healthy about going through pain. You know what I mean? You have to find ways to heal. Otherwise, you're gonna take that hurt and hurt somebody else who actually looks like you. And that's what we've been doing for a long time. So I think we have to come to a space where we acknowledge it and accept the fact that that's what's been going on, and then find ways to change it. Mr. Smalls is having technical issues. But anyway, guys, so that's why I decided to write the book, and talking about a lot of the stigmas, a lot of things that we see as positive things in the community, in our communities, that are actually hurting us. And when I talk about broken daughters, defeated boys, and fed up men, again, it's not a blame, right? My book is not about blaming anyone. It's about us taking accountability for where we are. It's about us coming together and help each other heal and accept that we had a history that didn't help us, that actually got us to where we are today. And we have to come to a space where we can accept it and not push it aside, and then heal from it. Otherwise, the more we keep pushing it away, the same way, as black people, we can't talk about slavery to white people, right? We're supposed to let it go. We're supposed to ignore it and not face the fact that it broke down a lot of, our spirits. You know what I mean? And the same goes, with, generational pain and parental pain. We have to talk about it. Communal pain, so we have to talk about it if we want to heal.
Well, the thing that I hate, Mark, a lot of times is that, as I said earlier, male pain is actually minimized, and I don't feel like we're giving the same level of credence a lot of times that our women are giving, as it relates to pain, slavery, and trauma. If you had to look at Mister, I would argue that Mister had post-traumatic stress disorder. What do you know about post-traumatic stress disorder, and why is that important in helping people understand some of the negative behaviors that you see, such as violence?
Well, it's important, because when you had a traumatic experience, right, and you never talk about it to anyone, you never face it. It's not healthy, because you're holding on to this pain, to this negative experience, and that keeps boiling inside of you, and that turns into into anger. It turns, the hurt turns into anger. And when you have that level of hurt that turns into anger, who are you going to take it out on? The people closest to you.
When you look at, I don't know how men in Haiti work, but you're from Haiti originally, and you and I had a powerful discussion recently about the Haitian crisis. But how do Haitian men deal with trauma, or more or less deal with pain? And did you ever see anything in your family, Mark, that more or less symbolized that these men could have went through trauma, but they went undiagnosed, and it was often seen as him being an aggressive, angry man, but in actuality, he was really suffering on the inside?
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you look at Haiti right now, the whole country is going through trauma. The way we treat each other, the way we burn stuff down, we break stuff down, we kill each other. It's trauma. You grew up watching cars crashing and killing people, and it's a lot of gruesome stuff. And because we were born into it, we grew up into it. To us, a lot of us, it's normal. You know what I'm saying? So you grew up thinking that, what, if I see somebody getting killed, that's normal. But in the mind, psychologically, it affected you. It affects us negatively. You know what I mean? So in Haiti, really, we kind of normalize a lot of dysfunctions, just like a lot of Black and African descent countries, and communities. Really, we normalize dysfunction because it's what we know. It's what we were taught.
Right. I want you to talk specifically about those dysfunctions, Mark. Was it rampant promiscuity? Was it rampant sexuality? Was it domestic violence? What did you see when you talk about this dysfunction that you're talking about? I want you to tell the audience specifically.
Yeah, I mean, of course, domestic violence. There was a lot of that. Promiscuity. It's any type of dysfunction you can think of. There is that, right? Because again, when you are going through this level of pain, you're always gonna find some level of dysfunction. Because you can't live a healthy life if your mind is not healthy. And in Haiti, personally, growing up, I witnessed a lot of things I had to do therapy for. But when I was in Haiti, they were normal. You know what I'm saying? So it's domestic violence was one of them. Parents raising their kids and thinking that if you beat your kids, it's normal, right? Again, that's one way we show how, we show our kids that we love them, to beat them up, to correct them. It's not a conversation. It's not a, it's not really a teaching moment. It's almost having the same mindset as I'm the ruler. I say you do. You know what I mean? So there's dysfunction, in Haiti, just like, there's dysfunction in any black communities.
No doubt. Listen, guys, if you like what we're doing, please donate the $ Cash App 7 Smalls. Please Cash App $ 7 Smalls. And I'm grateful for the people that are listening. And also, guys, I apologize for the technicalities earlier. This equipment I got is very new, and so I apologize. I got on the panel Dr. O. McCoy, and her and I, we've talked in the past. She's a Dr. O. She's a healthcare professional, and Dr. O, I want to ask you a question. When it comes down to mental health, what's your take on Mr. in your opinion?
I think, first of all, I always like to shout out the Manosphere. I think it's great, what you brothers are doing. Shout out to BMO, Brother Eric. Of course, Kevin Samuels, he set the stage for everyone. Everyone know I love my brother Dennis Furlan. So I want to shout those brothers out. They are near and dear to me, as all of you are in the Manosphere. I think when it comes to mental health, with us in our communities, I think mental health is kind of shunned and kind of pushed to the side. And I think Mr. was very misunderstood as a man. Oftentimes, I like to refer to my grandfather, as Mr. Because a lot of people thought my grandfather was a very stern man. But in fact, my grandfather was a loving man. He had very few words. And I think what is missing nowadays in our culture is a lot of women, more so. They haven't seen these type of men because unfortunately, a lot of women have not experienced having a father, growing up with a father, growing up with a grandfather, having your uncles around. And I think that has a big impact on our community into the way we behave and how we view Mr., as being mean. Most stern men that are about their business are not mean. They're just taking care of business, and they don't have time to joke and play around. They do it in their own way.
No doubt. Excellent. Dr. O, Lulu Bean said, can black men really heal in the West the effects of slavery, while agendas like feminism, homosexuality? What does this healing look like in the real world, in your opinion?
In my opinion, to answer that, I think the healing is going to have to start with us as black women. And, I say that all the time because a lot of black women, especially us as modern day black women, as it has been termed, I think we are the foundation of the black man healing. And when I say that, I mean, we have to start telling the truth to our black men. We have to start loving our black men, and we have to start supporting our black men. A lot of times we have a lot of single, bitter women in each other's ear that haven't been on dates in 5 and 6 and 7 years, giving bad advice to people, and giving bad advice to people when a woman is preparing a plate or doing something, anything, out of the norm of the modern day woman nowadays, for her man, she's deemed as a slave, or you're Miss Independent, or you're a Miss Pick Me, or whatever. But I think it's going to begin with us as black women telling the truth, learning how to apologize to black men. That's the only way we're going to be able to heal, because until we start supporting our black men the way we should, everyone else around us is not going to support him. But when we give him that support, society will start supporting him as a whole. But we don't give black men enough support. We just don't do it.
Yes. Dr. O, in your practice, or when you dealt with people that were victims of trauma, Doc, how often do you see cases of post-traumatic stress disorder? How often do you see it?
I see it a lot. I see it a lot in our community. I see it a lot in our communities, unfortunately, in people sometimes that are giving information. I actually saw it in myself at one point in my life. So, I mean,
I think Doc is frozen. I think Doc is frozen. Roger, how you doing, brother? Join the discussion. And what do you get from this topic about Mr.? Mr. was often demonized on The Color Purple. Was Mr. really a bad and violent man, or was Mr. more or less a victim of trauma that he saw his dad go through, and he more or less inflicted it on the women in his life? Dr. O is back. So hold tight, Roger. Go ahead, Dr. O. I'm sorry.
What I was saying was that PTSD is strong in our communities. Like I say, at one point in my life, I suffered from it. I think a lot of times all of us suffer from it. But I think clinical therapy in our community is kind of shunned upon, and it's kind of frowned upon, because we as a whole, especially again us as Black women, I get on us a lot because I think it starts with us. We do not want to say that out loud that we have some mental issues and some mental traumas going on. And with the vast majority of us growing up without fathers or a strong male guidance or a male figure in the house, we have a lot of mental traumas, because a lot of times we place images on you as Black men with what we've seen on TV. You know, Black women look at Real Housewives, they look at Lifetime, they look at all these shows that are European based, and we base them on you guys. So until we get ourselves together mentally, physically, emotionally, and as a whole, I mean, we're going to continue to suffer.
When you look at the contextual framework, Doc, of you have Nigerian roots. Your ancestry is Nigerian.
Right.
And so when you talk to your dad, who was a Nigerian, how do West Africans deal with trauma, in your opinion? Did you see post-traumatic stress manifest in your Nigerian family, and how did they deal with it?
You know, I really don't see that in the Nigerian community. I think my other brother up there to the top, I think he's from there also. I really don't see that a lot in our communities. And I think that happens because a lot of the culture is still alive, whereas here in the West, in America, culture is not still alive. I think we are a society here in the West that are forever young, and we don't pass down traditions and cultures and the norms. Whereas when you go to Africa, cultures are appreciated. When you grow into maturity, it's celebrated. But here we want to stay forever young. When you get old and when you're growing up and you're getting older in Africa, it's celebrated. You're more respected. But here we just want to forever be young. We don't want to grow old.
Right. That's powerful. You know, there are a lot of misters that have been misunderstood. And to the audience that are listening, you probably saw Mr. in your grandfather. You know, I saw a character, Doc, and his name was David Ruffin. David Ruffin is actually from my, his grandparents are from my hometown, believe it or not. And you know, David Ruffin was one of the famous singers from the Temptations. David Ruffin's father was a pastor, but he was very aggressive. And so the question poses, was David Ruffin potentially a victim of post-traumatic stress because he vicariously lived through the trauma of seeing his father abuse his mother? And see, we don't talk about that. We always demonize the man, just like and don't get me twisted, R. Kelly needs to go to jail for what he did, but R. Kelly also was a victim of trauma. But why is it, Mark, and then Roger, I want you to bring it in, that you feel, based on your research, that, and maybe you answered the question earlier, the Black men are always demonized and not giving the benefit of the doubt?
Well, again, you know, we're still not seen as you know, as a man, right? As men, as human beings, right? And the moment if you look at someone, you know, and don't see a human being, you take away everything human beings from that person. You know what I'm saying? And the fact that in a lot of us, you know, especially Black men, Black boys in our communities, we you know, a lot of us experience trauma, and it's not something we talk about, because again, we have this false expectation of Black boys and Black men being, you know, being manly, right? Being strong, and you know, boys don't cry, right? Boys don't show emotions. And the more we have these narratives, and you know, we believe that, you know what I'm saying? So and when you keep saying something, when you keep saying it, you believe it, and you treat people that way. So I think we have to stop, you know, change the narrative, and start seeing Black men and Black boys as human beings that right. who have been hurt and who actually need to face the traumatic experiences they faced in their homes and their communities from their parents, and help them heal from it.
No, I totally agree. Shout out to my dear friend Snuggles. She said, I'm going to go ahead and pay so when I actually ask questions that people are afraid to tackle, I pay my penance up front for being brash. Yeah, Snuggles, you funny. But Mark, not Mark, but Roger, what do you want to add to this topic, and tell the audience who you are, as you hail from the state of New York, I believe Brooklyn or Bronx. Did you see trauma as a young kid growing up in your family, and how the culture of the Panamanians handle trauma, similar to men in the West?
Well, I think Panama handles trauma just as terrible as people in the West handle it, to tell you the honest truth. And I will tell you this, especially for black boys, when I see a black boy being raised by a single mama, I always assume abuse. It's just from what I have always seen, there's something, and from people that I've spoken to, it's something that the mom and the boy it's always a battle. And it's always a silent abuse or it's just direct abuse. Now, I wouldn't say this if it was true. And mama, I love you, but you ain't nothing. My mama ain't nothing. My mama ain't nothing. She just not. I wish it wasn't true, but it is. My mom, and me growing up with my mom, I was like, I grew up with her mom. And growing up with her mom, it made me understand my mother a little bit better. Because I was like, if my grandmother did 1% of the things she did to you that she did to me, I could definitely understand why you screwed.
Yeah.
So, so that's why when I look at my mama, my brother doesn't know my grandmother. He didn't grow up with her. And, he doesn't really understand my mom. I said, if you knew her mom, you will understand why she's the way she is. She's a very jaded person. In our community, I don't like to use the word community because it's not a community, it's where we kick it at. In our community, especially boys and even girls, I'm gonna put both of them in there. It's just a culture of shut your mouth. Don't ever tell what goes on in this house. And again, we live in a matriarchal society that is just so weird how the abusee protects the abuser. That's what goes on in the black community. Don't tell on your mama, that's your mama. Or it's never really the daddy, it's usually the mama. Don't tell on your mama, you know what I mean? And it's just sad to see, really. And like I said, my mama, it's me and my brother and my sister, and me and my brother grew up completely different than my sister did. My mother had contempt for the boys, and the girl was like, we was her servant. We were supposed to serve her. Like, you wash the you clothes, and we would tell her, well, why don't you tell her to do something? You don't mind worry about her, you go do it. Mm-hmm. So my mother had a contempt for us. Contempt. Even when we was growing up, my brother is married now, and she was upset that, we were supposed to, my mother thought that we were supposed to take care of her. She was raising her boyfriend. So I'm like, are you crazy? Right. And I think she is, but that's either here or there. But I think I might need to send her your email, Kosher, so she can get in contact with you.
No, I want to add something to that. You are absolutely accurate in everything you said. I grew up with my grandparents until I was about 9, and then I moved in with my mom. I love my mom now. We have a great relationship. When I went through the process of, healing and facing my, the things that were hurting me, I had a really, really deep conversation with her, and we both cried, and we're in a better space now. You know what I'm saying? But the truth is, especially if you, as a son, if you grow up with a single mom, as hard as it is to accept, you are broken. You have a lot of trauma that you need to heal from. And now, so fast forward when you become a man, you start dealing with other women. You also have this negative, view of women because of what your mom did to you, until you realize that, you know what, I need to heal. I need to face these things if I'm gonna stop projecting them on somebody else. You know what I'm saying? But as far, as far as like growing up with it, with single mom again, which is really what we have in most households in our communities, it's damaging, and to have this again, this mindset now that women don't need men. They're not thinking about the children they're raising. They're actually raising broken generations and hurtful children, and it's to me it's really sad.
According to the research, guys, it's believed that 3 million people actually experience post-traumatic stress disorder. And some of the symptoms associated with post-traumatic stress disorder is agitation, irritability, hostility, hypervigilance, self-destructive behaviors, and social isolation. A lot of times, post-traumatic stress happens. It can be done to sexual abuse, seeing rampant violence in the inner cities. And a lot of times the way people deal with that trauma can be seen in many different ways. Doc, I want to ask you a question. You talked about the demonization of, unfortunately, men in America, but also particularly black men in America. Do you feel like when you look at West African culture compared to American culture, that black men in America are given a safe place or a healing place to deal with their traumas, or are they more or less seen as castaways to deal with it and suck it up?
I think that unfortunately black men here are just told to suck it up. It's no outlet, really for black men, to express themselves. And we are supposed to be your black man, your black woman, in order to express yourself and have a place of release and comfort. But oftentimes we just do not have that soft place, because so many of us are walking around here traumatized that have been raised by a single mother, and me and you talk about that all the time. I think being a single mother without the father around is the most selfish thing anybody can do to a child, because they need that male presence. And so you have a lot of women walking around that's Miss Independent, and they have become so hard for so long, they don't know how to be soft. They don't know how to be gentle. They don't know how to be loving to a man. They don't know how to speak loving words into a man. The only thing they know how to do is be combative. I talked to a lot of women that I counsel outside of social media, and I asked them to name 5 things about a black man that were positive, and they couldn't do it. The only thing most of the black women could come up with is like the type of car that he drove, or if he had some money, or if he was able to buy her some kind of bag. But if you ask the average black woman nowadays, ask us, name 5 things that went wrong in your last relationship. Oh, he this and he cheated, or he did this, and they can run it down. But if you ask the average black woman to say 5 things positive about a black man, she can't do it without it being something based around materialism. And it's sad. It's sad that we have gotten so hardened around ourselves and around each other that we don't know how to behave femininely. That's how come I kind of frown on these femininity movements that they have, because what they're doing is they're tricking you, brothers. They're having women that are pretending to be feminine, showing them, oh, well, you can wear a dress, or oh, you can do your hair like this, or oh, you can do this and that. But after that 90 days, brothers, I'm sorry to say, it's gone, because it has to be born within her in order for her to be a lady. That thuggish, ruggish, ball weave wearing woman is gonna come out. So what y'all are getting is something like a package that you see at the grocery store. It's going to look nice in the beginning, but then once you start peeling all those layers back, you're going to feel like you just have a man with a hair hat on that's RuPaul in a dress.
That would ask you funny. But so let me ask you guys a question. Snuggles asked the question, has anyone ever gotten beaten with an extension cord? If so, who was it done by? Do they do this in other parts of the planet? Snuggles, I'm going to have to put you on planet Z, because I don't know the hell you're talking about.
All my beatings were done by my mom.
But Snuggles, to answer the question, yes, I was beaten by an extension cord. I don't mind saying that. I think because I'm sure my mom was beaten by one, and her grandma was probably beaten by one, and she was probably beaten by the slave master by one. So it's vicarious trauma that's more or less been transcended, and it's unfortunately, but they probably did it a lot of times out of ignorance because they thought by harshly beating the child would make them more or less stay protected. You got to understand, slavery did a lot of negative things on the psyche of a man. You know, I'm from the South, and I used to hear my grandmom say, "Oh Lord." And so when you hear your grandmom say, "Oh Lord," oh Lord, a lot of time was a symbol or a cue for trauma. It could have been that she saw, her son getting hung or lynched. It could have been that she saw her husband lose his job. It could have been that she saw her child being snatched away from her bosom. "Oh Lord" was a key term heard in the South. So that the trauma that we dealt with, we more or less passed down some of those negative traits to our children. And see, it's a term that we call in clinical therapy called legacy burdens. And I'm going to get certified in IFS training. It's very expensive. But it talks about legacy burdens. And those legacy burdens a lot of times are transcended. So, Roger, what was corporal punishment like in Panama? And then also, Mark, I want you to tell the audience what corporal punishment was like as well.
What do you mean corporal punishment as in like my mama?
Getting beat up, getting beat.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, again, my first half of my life, I grew up with my grandma, my mother's mother. I mean, I come from a long line of women who ain't nothing. I can't. I wish it wasn't true, but it is. My mom, my grandmama, my mama, and my sister's about to graduate next month. It's just that bad. Corporal punishment at my grandmother's house. She wasn't really too much around. She was chasing, and my grandmother was in her 60s chasing. She was still chasing raw penis and liquor, but she was out here. So I really didn't get too much corporate punishment for my grandmother. My mother, on the other hand, oh boy, extension cord. This is a true story, Mama. You ain't nothing. I wish I wouldn't have to tell this story, but I do. My mother beat my brother with a hammer one time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my mother's crazy like that. My mother is loco. So my brother had like 8 knots in his head, and my dad came to pick him up, and he tried to put a do-rag to try to make the knots go down. I said, that ain't gonna work, bro. So corporal punishment in my mama's house is whatever she could get. Again, my mother had contempt for the boys. I cannot express that enough. I don't know what she saw. She saw, boyfriends. She saw, I don't know what she saw in us, but she had a contempt for us. So my mother would pick up whatever she could grab, whatever literally she could grab.
Yeah. I think one thing we have to realize, right? We are reminders, sons, we are reminders of our dads. And one thing that, mothers were always saying in Haiti was that, you just like your father to the boys. And it's so damaging because we are not our fathers, right? And when you keep saying that, it's almost like you're trying to turn us into the man you hate so much. And for me, my mom had me when she was 15. So now, again, when I started taking on, my own healing process, I got to understand and empathize with the fact that this woman was hurting, and a lot of the hurt that she was experiencing were taken out on me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I used to get my butt whooped any chance she got. And that would be with branches and literally like whips. If she tells you to go get the size that you want to get beat up with, you go get a branch that you feel like you want to get beat up with. You know what I mean? So so all those traumas is as black boys, you 13, 10, 11, going through it. Those things don't just disappear. You have to understand, what they were and literally face them and heal from them. Otherwise, you're gonna go on through life suffering.
And just to add to that as well, because I spoke to my mama, and again, I have even though I'm clowning my mama, and I love her from very far distance, but I I asked my mother. I was 27. I'm 35 now. I asked my mother. I said, "Why don't you try all that stuff now while I'm bigger? Why don't you try it now?" And her face. I say this to say, they're bullies as well. They are bullies. Most of these women are bullies. If most women can beat, if a woman can beat a man, she would. She would. If let's use the doctor right here, and I'm not saying that you will, but if a woman would try, if she had the opportunity, like I could physically beat him, she would.
Right.
Now, how do they do it? While you're small, that's the opportunity. Because I asked my mother, why don't you try it while I'm 27, while I can defend myself? Why don't you try it now? She was lost. And I put it to say, most of them are bullies. They are bullies.
Well, it's learned behavior, unfortunately, and it's learned behavior due to, unfortunately, not having fathers. Doc, when you look at the current trends in the American culture, as Roger said, we don't have a community, and also Mark, we really don't have a community. Do you see a transition, or more or less a de-evolution of us coming back to the times when the families were intact? Or do you see a further eroding of the American family due to unresolved trauma?
Wait, who's the question for?
Did you freeze, Doc? It was for Doc. I think she froze.
She did.
All right. So more or less, Mark, when you think about the American family, do you see us ever coming back to a time when things were solid? But before you answer that question, I want to try to answer this question for Snuggles. Snuggles say, is it possible for women to lose undefeated, used as a model to learn from, and it's possible for men to... Doc, I think you go ahead and bring Snuggles in for one of your remediation courses. I love Snuggles. I don't know what the hell Snuggles talking about. Is it possible for women to lose undefeated? Yeah. So Snuggles, you want to come on, you can pose the question. You get in the avatar, cam up, Snuggles, bro. I don't know what you're talking about, sweetie. But anyway, so I guess I was asking the question, do you ever see a time, Doc, where we'll go back to a time where we were solid and the family was intact, and or do you think the current trend of dysfunctional families are going to continue in this current culture?
The only way I think that we can go back to culture that we had before is to, again, we become mature adults. Like I said, again, I think we've run away from maturity. I think we're going to have to start in the way we dress, the way we carry ourselves, the way we speak, the people in which we associate with. We're going to have to push our agenda to the max times 10. For example, when I go out in public, you'll probably catch me in some slacks or something nice. You'll never catch me in a pair of tights clinging up my behind, and all this kind of stuff. I'm a grown woman, so I like to be treated as such. And until we start realizing that there's nothing wrong with us being adults, we don't have to use slang. We don't have to use lingo. We don't have to be well versed, in what's going on. We have to really start being mature. If you look at other cultures, when they get to be 25, 26, 27, they have a total different agenda than what we have. When you go abroad, I'm sure when you go to Haiti, when you go to Africa, people there have a totally different agenda than what we have. You'll never see the things that we glorify on TV abroad in other countries. So that's how come they look and they kind of frown upon us here in this country, because the things that we gravitate to in our immature thinking, we don't have the correct adult development. We gravitate to sex, money, and being seen, and false egos. And we create those false egos all the time by the materialistic things that we have that 9 times out of 10, we can't afford. So until we get back to the old ways of things and totally convert our thinking, the way we interact and who we mingle with and all this stuff, only at that point will we go back to how it used to be. We're going to have to start being examples as ladies, to the young ladies, so they'll see that it's okay, to have to be a lady of class. Because nowadays what they're looking at strippers and Real Housewives and all this old crazy stuff. If you go out to any place, 9 times out of 10, you're going to see Black women who mimic whores. Because if you look at this in the 70s, most Black women, the prostitutes, look better and were more dressed than you have the women nowadays that we see outside in society. It used to be back in the day, 20-inch hair and all this kind of stuff. Prostitutes had that. Blonde hair, prostitutes had that. These are trends that were ladies, that came from ladies of the nights. Thick, big eyelashes, prostitutes had that. And they had that for a reason, because when they was doing oral sex, they had it so then that would catch, that wouldn't enter their eyes. So a lot of things that we do, we mimic prostitution. So it's gonna have to start with us. I can't say it. And you brothers, I always tell the young men that I mentor, be picky with who you guys talk to. It's okay for you guys to say, I don't want to deal with you. I don't like women who wear wigs. I don't like women who wear Freddy Krueger nails. I don't like fat women. I don't like, it's okay to say that, because I was talking to a friend of mine. I remember back in the day, you wouldn't have these type of women even okay with coming in public saying half the stuff that they say, demeaning you brothers. Y'all are going to have to get back to the basics and start saying, I don't like that. I don't want you to talk to me like that, and walk away from it. Some women, like I tell these young men, are meant to be seen only after dark, and you don't talk to them at all, in order to put them back in their place and to put us back where we need to be.
Doc, let me ask you a question. Why is Mr. seen as an iconic linchpin when it comes down to characterizing the American male, but more particularly, Doc, the American black man? Why is Mr. always seen as an iconic linchpin of being misogynist and hatred towards our women? Because, as I said earlier, I believe Mr. probably went through a lot of unresolved mental illness, and he carried that into relationships. But why do so many women turn to Mr.? And I think Alice Walker wrote the book.
And
right.
if we want to talk about Alice Walker, she wouldn't be my cup of tea anyway. She wouldn't be anyone that I would have over to my house for a nice cup of tea, because I wouldn't trust her being around me based on some of the things that I know Alice is about. So I'll leave that there. But I think a lot of times, us, again, as black women, we're not used to seeing strong men. Black women nowadays want a watered down version of a black man. Most of the average black women want to be able to tell a black man what to do. Anytime, if you try to tell, I've seen men tell women, I don't like that outfit, or that's not how we would, a woman, we will argue you guys down with what you like. We are very argumentative. We are very combative, and they have never seen a real man just take control. So when men take control, most women that are used to running their mouth, being loud, belligerent, bullying, brutes, and fighting, they're going to say, oh, well, he ain't, gonna tell me what to do. And then she's gonna have her wig wearing sidekicks on the side, whispering in her ear, telling her that she's right. You ain't got to put up with that girl, because they have not had a man in the household. They've not been around their grandfathers. Half of them barely have male cousins. These women do not know how to be around men. That's why I say, if most women were around my grandfather, they would say, oh, he was mean. Or, some people would probably say that about my dad. Oh, he was mean. He don't like nobody. He don't do this and that. But my father and my grandfather, they loved me. They love me. I would sometimes sit as a little kid and watch my grandfather play with his horses and stuff. He was a loving man, but he was a hard man. And unfortunately, a lot of women nowadays do not have a good version of a hard man to see and gravitate to. Most women want to tell a man what to do. And I think that is terrible, because you know how I am, Coach. I don't want to think, y'all. I don't want to do anything. I want my man to have my pocketbook. I want him to do everything for me. I'm almost like an infant. I don't want to do anything. That's why I appreciate men. And I always tell women, it's not a want. We need a man like we need water, because us as black women, we need that guidance. But a woman who's not used to a man will say she don't need no man to guide her and tell her what to do. And those are the kind y'all need to leave alone.
Go ahead, Mark.
It's funny you said that. I was actually doing an interview this morning, and I said, we need each other like we need water. We were created to need water, to need food, and we were created to need each other. And there was a young lady, she actually got upset at the fact that I said she needs a man. She's like, I want a man, I don't need a man.
No.
So, it's just a misunderstanding of the word. Again, we have so many smart people nowadays. We use words to justify the things that we are actually hurting by. You know what I mean? The things that are actually hurting us and our children, because we don't like the way it makes us feel. You know what I'm saying? So I just wanted to add that.
Well, I think a lot of it, Mark, is indoctrination. And I think that liberal indoctrination has more or less veered us away from traditional morals. Guys, to the people that are listening, there's 43 people that are watching. I love you guys. Please share this show. This show is important because Mr. has been more or less a negative caricature of the American black man as it relates to trauma. And so share this show with at least 5 people. Once you share the show, hit the 1 button. But while we're listening, I want to ask you this question, Doc. Do you feel like the lack of cooperation has led to post-traumatic stress, not only for our girls, but also for our men? Meaning, because some of our women are not cooperative in the homes, do you think the little girls that have been molested, the boys that have been molested or seeing violence in their inner city is due to the lack of cooperation and also radical liberal policies? What's your take on that?
I do. I agree with you. I believe it has a lot to do with not cooperating, and again, it goes back to, I get beat up a lot of times for this, but I'm a black woman and I can't do nothing but say what I see on the inside. We're uncooperative. And like I say, it's just time out. It was a brother had said something. I wrote what he said down. His name was Von Bryant. He said, when men open up, he said, emotionally, it's called simping. See, we try to categorize black men into such derogatory things all the time. Most men they don't show emotion, but I wouldn't say that has anything to do with simping. That's a totally different culture from the type of men that we are talking about, that we are speaking about. A well-rounded man is going to have some kind of emotions. He may not do fall out in the floor and die and cry, but I've seen my grandfather, be emotional. I haven't saw him many times, but when he showed emotions, and there was nothing simpish about him, as a man. It's unfortunate, black men have to take, all these different hits and all these different names, just for wanting to be peaceful, and it was something else a young lady had said too, and I'm going to say this, like I tell most black women, men run to praise and they run away from criticism. So until we as black women start getting it together, learning how to stroke the ego of a black man the way other cultures stroke the egos of black men, don't get mad if a black man go abroad to find peace and tranquility somewhere else for something that we as black women are not willing to give you guys.
Well, that's a powerful point of view. And shout out to my dear friend, sweet Lulu Bean. Lulu Bean is actually, I believe, from Africa. Might be from Nigeria, Ghana, I believe. And Lulu Bean, please come on if you can. But Lulu Bean said women do physically beat men because they know black men can't retaliate or they'll get arrested. And I would say not only black men, I would just say American men in general. Lulu Bean she was on the Lead Attorney show, and I remember listening. She was talking about the characteristics that most women need to have in order to get a viable man. And so she talked about the metrics, Doc, that was actually normal in not only in the black community, but in the American fabric.
Right.
And she was saying that you couldn't have children out of wedlock. You had to be a virgin or chaste, and you had to be educated. And so those women could more or less get the top tier men. But we live in a culture now, Doc, where you got some women that demand that men more or less adhere to traditional mores of the past, like he got to pay 100% of all the bills, but they don't meet the requirements of the women that Lulu Bean is talking about. And so, Lulu Bean, if you're listening, I would love for you to pop in and give some input to that about cultural norms and all of that. And also, Doc, I want you to talk about. You said that your grandfather was a quiet man, and we talked about in private in the past that it's a possibility he was a victim of post-traumatic stress. And one of the triggers of post-traumatic stress or behaviors is social isolation. So let's talk about that real quick.
I don't think my grandfather grew up in a time, that was different from the time of many people. He grew up, when he was familiar with sharecropping and all of this stuff. And I think some parts of his childhood may have been traumatized, but for the most part, he was raised. My great grandfather, who raised him, was just a hard man. They were hard working men. It was nothing for them to be up during sunset and sundown. So, my grandfather was a very hard working man, and he expected anyone to be around him to be hard working. He didn't take many excuses as to why, you couldn't succeed. As far as when you see about different, people blaming somebody else. Oh, I couldn't do it because of this. No, you don't do that. You look that person right in the mirror and you blame yourself. That's who you blame for your demise. And to kind of tag in on what Lulu Bean said, as far as when it goes to women want a man to pay 100%, I think we live in a different time right now. And also it's a good gesture, but I think nowadays households need two incomes. People can say what they want to say about that. All of that burden should not be put on the man, because to me, a man is his price value to me is priceless. And the reason I say this, after work, we may have to cook, we may have to do this and that, but a man is on guard all the time. It's like a security guard 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. He's constantly thinking, wondering, worrying, the next step, this step over here. We just got to worry about what we're going to cook the next day. What do you want to eat? What do you want? So a man, to me, is priceless. I don't think we as women would ever know everything that a man talk about. I will sit, like I said, and look at my grandfather and my father. I will see they worrying on their face, but it never came out of their mouth. So I think the value of a Black man is priceless. And I just want to get that out there. I'm so sick of us as women comparing Black men based on the money and stuff that they make. That's another thing I'm sick of, because like I said, we want a man to pay all of our bills, but we are subpar. And I'm going to just go ahead and say it. We are fat. We wear waist trainers. We hide our bodies. We hide our hair. We hide our face. We don't wear our real nails. We don't, half the time, we don't even give real information. We give fake finances. Half the Black women make $30,000 or $40,000 a year. They want y'all to be millionaires and take care of them and buy them stuff that they can't even afford for themselves. They expect a man to come and rescue them from an apartment. So, no. Why should a man pay full price for something that's been used, ran through, wore out, clubbed out, washed out? Why? He shouldn't. Because to me, if you're inside of a club, you don't need a quality man, no way. You need the type of men that you attract inside that club. So I want to put that out there first and foremost. If you are not a virgin, if you have been ran through, you don't deserve any of that. You do not deserve it at all.
And I want to add to that. You guys see me on a bike. I do personal training, health coaching, and most of the clients that I usually get are between the ages of 45 and 55, and they're mostly females who are washed. Here's the thing. I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna tell you the truth. No. This is true. The woman will not lose the weight for the man she currently has. She's going to lose the weight for the next stranger she's about to meet.
Sure.
That's why they come to me.
Right.
Because they just broke up with their husband.
Yeah.
And I always ask them, why didn't you lose the weight for the man you had?
Correct.
Why didn't you? Now you're going to lose the weight for a complete stranger who's going to dog you out.
Right.
Correct.
And this is their psyche. I'm like, this. And then also, usually they just come from a breakup, and they're about to turn into the whole face. And they usually try to start the whole face with the trainer. Like, I'm going to screw him. I'm like, no, you're not. No, you're not.
I hope your clients are not watching.
Oh, well, I tell everything I'm telling you, I tell them.
Sweet Lulu Bean, please come back on, dear. We want to hear your point of view. You got some very good points of view. And you're from Africa like Dr. O, but I want you to come back on and share your points of view because it's needed. Snuggle say, is it possible for a woman to lose and be used as a martyr to learn from? And is it possible for a man to become continuously saved from their transgressions that they knowingly did before they even did it? What's your take on that, Mark? And then, Doc, I want you to see if you can tackle that.
I honestly don't understand the question.
Me either.
So, Mark, do you understand what Snuggles is saying? She said, is it possible for a woman
The break of life.
I'm sorry.
She says, okay, hold up, because I want to help Snuggles. You know, I made a call on the spirits. Is it possible for a woman to lose and be used as a martyr, to learn from, and is it possible for a man to be continuously saved from the transgressions that they knowingly did? So we'll come back to it, Snuggles. You know, I'm going to call on the ancestors for that. But Lulu Bing, how you doing, dear? How you doing? Are you there? Hello, Lulu Bing. Unmute yourself. Can you hear me, Lulu Bing? Hello. All right. So Lulu Bing, I guess she's adjusting her mic. But Doc, what you said probably is going to strike a lot of chords. You know,
Yeah.
why is the lack of accountability so manifest in America, in your opinion, Doc? And go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I think it's manifested again in America because, like I said again, everybody say it's okay. You know, it's okay to be. Nobody call fat women out. You know, nobody call, and I've been calling women out on that for years. You know, for years. You know, why do you want a man that's fit but you're not fit? You know, no man want that. No man is going to be proud, you know, to have you on his arm and you're fit and you're fat and you're fluffy and you got on the Spanx. What man in his right mind want that? You know, I mean, if we have to be clear about it, you know, and going back to the basics mean taking them hair hats off of our heads. We look ridiculous. Everybody know that's not our hair going all the way down past our butt. You know, everybody know it. But we tend to think that look good. You know, it doesn't look good. It looks tacky, it looks trampish, and it doesn't look like anything, you know, a man would want to marry. Women like that are those are club type women. Those women are not to be taken seriously. And I think men need to start being more vocal about it, you know, and letting them know this is not what I want. I'm not gonna waste my time with you.
Right. Lulu Bing, can you hear us, dear? Can you hear us? Lulu Bing, can you hear us?
She might be having the same problems I had.
Yeah.
Hi there. I'm so sorry. My earpods were taking a while to connect.
Okay. Thank
Hi,
you.
everybody.
How you doing, Lulu Bing? It's a pleasure to have you on the show. I saw you on the Lead Attorney channel a couple of months ago, a month or two ago, and you were talking about dowry. You were talking about chastity. You were talking about the qualifications that a woman had to have, Lulu Bing, in order to get a high quality man. Why is it in America, Lulu Bing, that, you know, being a virgin or not being promiscuous or having children outside of wedlock was seen as the norm in your country, but in America it's not the norm, and women still expect men to adhere to those traditional mores, in your opinion?
I was saying in the comments earlier on, I was saying that Western women, I'm going to talk about my sister specifically, because that's my focus. But it seems that this side, westernized Black women here and in England, I've also lived in England, are incentivized. So in South Africa, if a man makes you pregnant, there's very little incentive. You can go and try and put him on child support, but there's a cap. It's hard. It's a hard process. You call the police. You know, they're not rushing. They'll tell you more than likely it's between a man and a woman. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So here, the government, like I said, government institutions like the law, they're not involved like that. And also the culture, I suppose, has fail-safes. I mean, in South Africa, you can have a polygamous marriage. It's legal. Whereas here, I think everything that would empower a man, like I said, what's the incentive for a woman to compete? You guys are told to, you know, like I said again in the comments, women like Lizzo, women like Kim Kardashian. I mean, those are made to look like women, and anyone that wants to be led by a man or believes that a man is what's the word, my English escapes me, but the importance of a man is minimized here. And if any importance to a man, I've been told by so many American women, like, what am I guess because I'm from Africa, I don't have a sense of independence. You understand?
Right.
I've gotten that a lot here, but I will say in Africa, women aren't incentivized, and I do feel that goes a long way. But they're trying to change that. There was a hashtag men are trash that they tried to push in South Africa, and men pushed back against that movement. And here in America, I don't see a lot of pushback.
Right.
And I've spoken to Tim Howard about that I think Black men need to now start, the manosphere, that movement needs to move to the next step. And now you guys need to start galvanizing yourself.
Right.
I've been watching the white manosphere. They have conferences. They've got men's rights groups. And that's where Black men, I think, need to move now.
Right. And we are moving towards it, because you're correct. Frederick Douglass said it better than me. He said that power never conceded without a struggle, Lulu Bean. He said never have it and never will. And I tell men that men have the power to change the course of relationships. I always tell the women that are listening, the good women that are listening, women are the gatekeepers to sex, men are the gatekeepers to relationships.
Right.
We determine who we marry. And as I think the guy BGS once said, he said the water seeks its own level. And so, Doc, you said something that was very powerful. And before I broach that question, I'm going to thank you, Tim Howell, for sending me a $5 super chat. And thank you, Solo Key 601. I'm grateful for you guys. Love you guys. And to the people that are listening, if you can't donate, please share this content, because Mr. has been demonized in the American public. And unfortunately, a lot of people see you guys as Mr. But I lost my train of thought. So what I was saying, Dr. O talked about a lot of times how in other countries, men have standards. Why is it that you think, Lulu Bean, that so many modern women, and when I mean by modern, that's black or white or whatever, have such an entitled mindset, and they don't have nowhere near the virtue of the women in other countries, but they expect the full benefits?
Because that's what we're told, because we're raised by single mothers. That's
Right.
also like I said, now this phenomenon is also growing in South Africa. If you guys were to go to South Africa and you were to go off the plane, you can go to Dunkin' Donuts. You're not going to have a culture shock per se until you go out of the city, until you start going into people's homes. It's very metropolitan. So that Kenya, I've got friends in Kenya, people are starting to complain. As soon as a Nigerian woman leaves Nigeria and lands in England or lands here in America, I've been watching this Nigerian woman on one of these housewives show, Wendy, got a boob job. I don't know, she keeps on going about all her degrees. As soon as she's in Nigeria, it doesn't matter how many degrees you have. You're a woman, you're a person, So, I mean, I don't know. I just, a lot of things have been perverted. Kosher clinician, a lot of things. Sexuality has been perverted. How we see each other has been perverted, which is why we're not having our normal relationships. I understand men saying that women are the gatekeepers to sex, but men have so many options now. You don't have to suffer to get sex. I know so many women at work who are all on these websites. It's not hard. You don't have to. You get what I'm trying to say? That men actually have more sexual power than they think.
Right.
That there's a lot of loose women out there. And like I say, in South Africa, men still have a voice. There was a big issue where we've got taxi ranks, for instance. Taxi ranks is where we go for public transport. And, they tried, some women's movement went there. They tried to do your slut walk thing, going there naked with everything. And it was terrible. They They did not cut, they were whipped. It was physical, you know what I mean? They were demeaned. But like I say, in Africa, men still have a voice. In Africa, men fight back. Whereas I don't really see that here. In the
Right,
first couple
right,
of months that I was
right,
here,
right.
I saw 3 guys being put in jail by us, one by a sister, 2 by so-called baby mamas. I've seen men here still looking after baby mamas, and I don't understand that. This woman doesn't benefit you in any way, but you're paying for her
Right,
and her lifestyle. So,
right.
like I say, men here need to take that power back, and men need to all of it. This thing of women hold the keys to sex, that doesn't hold water anymore. Men have way more options than they think they do here in this country.
Right, right, right. It sounds like to me, Lulu Bean, that in your country in South Africa, there's a strong male patriarchy that holds the women accountable. Is that what I'm hearing you saying, Lulu Bean?
Yes, that men still push back. Men will still. I mean, anybody will tell you about a Zulu man, for instance. Zulu men are stubborn. You can't just do what you want. He's sweet, but the minute you cross him, people will tell you about Xhosa men and how they are. So you know how you guys speak when you're from the south, or you're Geechee, or you're like this, or you're like that. They know who you are. So there, who you are in terms of who you're dealing with. And like here, like I say, there isn't an identity for men. Even the manosphere is very there are very few, can I say, balanced men who understand the nature of a woman but don't understand the nature of themselves. I
Right,
understand that
right.
they're angry, I understand that you're red pill, but you've got to get out of that mindset, and you've got to find your power back.
Right,
because
right.
because you don't have any power when you're in that mindset.
Absolutely, I agree.
I totally agree. You're
Yeah.
100% correct, Lulu Bean. The power lies within, and that's why I decided to do these shows as a clinical therapist to let men know that they have power. I did a show in the past, and that show said that she only respects power and strength, and men have more power. One of the reasons why I endorse world travel. I'm going to be in the movie Frustrated 3. Go check out Al Gree's movie Frustrated 3. Him, my man Deacon Eric Spencer, Chris Strongheart, and the crew from BMO. We're going to be in the movie, and Chris Strongheart was interviewed. I was interviewed, and Dr. Ron Neal. And what's happening, Doc? Men are actually exercising their options outside of the confines of America. You talked about Courtney off of the Peep Channel. She got a scheme affliction because I don't think she liked what I was saying. But it's more or less to what Doc is saying. A lot of these women, not all, but many of them are actually fawning fake femininity just to get a man because they want to hit the last buzzer. But at the same time, they still don't really add anything special. There was a time, Lulu Bean, you correct me if I'm wrong, especially in your country, if a woman had children, she was seen as a castaway. Am I right or wrong?
So sorry, say that word again. If a woman was?
I said if she was seen as a woman that had many kids by many men was seen as a castaway. Correct me if I'm wrong.
So, what's happened now is, or what tends to happen is, if you have a child out of wedlock, the child will go to your family. It's not your child. There's actually a word for it. It's called Kaya. Kaya meaning home. So that means it's the children's home. So what that is it's trying to prevent a situation where they're trying to prevent you from not being married again. Obviously, your dowry will be lower, and there is a big chance that you might not get married because But if you're young enough, with this new generation, if you're young enough, there is a chance that will happen. But your child doesn't go with you to the new marriage, so that they don't get exposed to abuse,
Right.
so that your marriage doesn't get affected by this child. So what will happen is your parents will raise the child, and then you as a woman will be given the chance to move on.
Yeah, that was actually the culture in Haiti too.
And just to add to this, there's three things that causes people to change. Number one, divorce. Number two, if you get diagnosed with an unexpected illness, or three, somebody dies unexpectedly around you. See, what happens when somebody, especially these men who are going through divorce, when you're going through divorce, you're broken and you're looking for answers. And here's the manosphere, because believe me, any man who goes to divorce, they're going on YouTube and they type it in something and whoop, there it comes. So what I'm saying is this. It's not, I remember my high school teacher, Mr. Pasacreta, he was a white dude. He was married 5 times. We're not in those times no more. You married once and you're done. Because once that person gets burned like this in this society, they're not going to get married no more. It's a wrap. So the tide has already turned. The straw that broke the camel's back is already passed.
Right.
Men are not going for it anymore. People are still getting married, but I tell you, you ain't going to find too many millennials or Gen Xers who've been married 3 or 4 times. It's a one time and I'm done.
Well, you know what's unique about this panel? We have 5 people from different backgrounds of the African diaspora. Pete Charles is Trinidadian. Dr. O is Nigerian American. Lulu Bean is, I believe, South African. Mark is from Haiti. And Roger is actually from Panama. And so you have a very unique blend of blacks from the African diaspora. And so Pete Charles, you're a very intellectual man. You see the dysfunction in the American fabric. Do you feel like some of our women contribute to the trauma that our children are experiencing? And did you see trauma as a man growing up, or post-traumatic stress potentially, to some of the Trinidadians when you were growing up as a young man?
Boy, I tell you, for a significant part of my life, I was a walking example of that stress and rage. And I didn't even know it. I came from a patriarchal system, and my mother and father always inculcated in me that, before you get married, before you take on that kind of responsibility, you have to become financially stable otherwise. And at that time, I was in the US, and boy, I tell you, I was there alone, so I didn't have any family structure or anything. And I just had to make it. But, I was unfortunately or otherwise, and this is on me, I don't blame anybody, the women I dated, they were no better off than me. In other words, they were no better off financially than me as a guy coming in on ass, as it were. And yet having that structure where I felt like I had to be responsible. So I, would have certain kind of setbacks. And I remember some black women in the U.S. telling me that that black men had it harder, and that white men treated black women, paternalistically in a way. And I just didn't accept it. I just found that, unacceptable. And I just kept, one of the things I did is I believe in the elbow grease theory. I don't believe in shortcuts or people are born genius or whatever. Even a genius has to read the book at least once. And I just kept plugging away because I know that ultimately I would succeed. But in the process of running that gauntlet, I became angry. And one of the things that anger caused me to do was I gained weight. I'm kind of big, tall guy. I'm almost 6'8". I was weighing about 275 pounds. People thought I played football. But that was mostly fat from just kind of eating late, sleeping, just eating poorly and stuff like that. I think it wasn't until many years later, as I got outside the U.S., started to travel, got back into my own country, around my own family support system, that I realized that I was in a very stressful situation, and that caused me to be angry. It affected my relationships with people because, again, I did not come from a culture where you go into counseling or where you just kind of solve problems. You sat back in the peace and quiet and solved them. And sometimes solving those problems meant that you made difficult decisions, and people may not like it. And, you make a decision and then you adjust accordingly. as you go along. And so that's one point. The second point I want to address is something that Lulu Bean has been saying that I think that people don't understand about the US system. The system has become the way it is because of what I call the ratchet effect. What happened is a sensational event occurs. Let's call it a crime, for want of a better word. And then the media gets involved, and immediately the politician sees on that, and they pass legislation based on the worst of us. In other words, let's take domestic violence as a case in point. It used to be the case that if the police came out to the house, they would talk to the wife or whatever, they would take the guy out, he'd have a cool down period for the weekend and came back or whatever it is. Now, in that system, some guy killed his wife, or some guy come home drunk and beat his wife, broke her nose or whatever, and then they run commercials based on that. But these men represent 1%, possibly less than all the men. And what happened is they changed the law based on what these rare outlier cases do, and then they start ensnaring everybody. And then they created an incentivized system then where people realize that they can use the system to exert control in the home. So if I want a guy out, I just call the police on him and they automatically arrest him. And all of that came in because lawsuits were filed against municipalities because, again, some guy who, his wife called the police on him, and whatever they did or didn't do, he ended up killing her. But again, this is not the average normal case. This is a rare case, but they passed this law that affects everybody. And I see that happening a lot. So in order for, I don't know how that's going to change or ever be reversed, I think men would have to, again, do the same thing. They'd have to take extreme cases of women who abuse men in some fantastic way. And then they'd have to go but the media is not going to sensationalize it, unfortunately. But they'd have to go to the Congress and get it rolled back. Those are the two observations I have at this time.
No doubt, no doubt. You talked about, Pete, that you went through post-traumatic stress disorder potentially. I want you to share with the audience the traumas that you experienced as a man growing up and how you processed that trauma. Because many probably saw you as being Mr. from The Color Purple. But how did you process your trauma? Because a lot of time, Mr. is often seen in negative light instead of seeing him from a clinical perspective as someone that's dealing with pain.
Boy, that is an excellent question. I started to read books like, I forget the name of the Jewish psychologist who was in the concentration camp. I think it's Man Quest for Learning or something like that. I forget his name right now. And you know who he is. He's supposedly the guy who invented something called logotherapy.
Right, logotherapy. Viktor Frankl.
Yeah. One of the things that he observed in the concentration camp, there were two types of people, those who survived and those who didn't survive. The survivors were people who, in the midst of the concentration camp, freezing to, almost watching people around them freeze to death, watching people starve to death. They saw life for themselves outside of the concentration camp. They felt that what they were experiencing was almost not their reality. And the people who perished in the, in the concentration camp were people who live a life of exasperation and despair. And that was one of the books. And then the other book that had an impact on me is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And I learned that in life, we can approach situations where we don't have to be winners and losers. See, this is the whole thing about, especially when dealing with men, and our ego. I want to engage somebody where both of us come away feeling like we both won. And law, they say that a judge knows that he makes a good decision when both parties in the dispute come away angry. It's almost like the Solomon choice, where, okay, I'm going to cut this baby in half, and everybody can be mad at me. So, it took a while. It took a while for it to happen. It took people who I felt able to confide in, confidentially, and then they gave me advice. So it wasn't something that I came to on my own. So the same thing I told you that I didn't go in for counseling, that is true. But I was fortunate to have had friends around me who, who were better educated than me on these issues, and they helped me a lot in terms of giving me literature and and listening to me and telling me some of their own life stories and how they overcame hardship.
Right. Mark, I want you to tell the audience the title of your book. And once you tell the title of your book, tell the audience the title of your book, Mark. Can you hear me?
Oh, excuse me, sorry.
Mark, tell the audience the title of your book, and I want you to go to each part of the title and tell the audience the relevance to that title. Tell the audience the title of your book, please.
Absolutely. It's called Strong Women, Fed Up Men, Defeated Sons, Broken Daughters, Healing Generational Pain. When I talk about, let's talk about defeated sons and broken daughters first. When we talk about defeated sons, as a son, when you grow up, watching, either your mom or not having a father around, that impacts you because you start functioning as a man, right? As a boy, you start functioning as a man. And because of that, you get defeated for not meeting expectations either you set for yourself or expectations that are set, that you were supposed to meet based on somebody else's expectations for you. So when that happens, a lot of us boys, we get defeated because, again, we're not able to function as men. And when we look at broken daughters, it's the same concept, really. When you look at either your mom as a single mom struggling to either make ends meet and not having a father around, that affects you, that hurts you. And because of that, you start getting broken down psychologically and start pretty much becoming strong so you can survive some of the things that you were supposed to be protected by, a father figure, or you were supposed to be loved a certain way by your mother. But because of that dynamic, you start getting into relationships that are broken, that are hurtful, and that hurts you, growing up. And, that takes us to, fed up men. And as you become older as a man, when you go through all these things where you're not meeting expectations, where you hardly do anything right, at some point, you get fed up, right? It's like, well, I've been, I'm trying, I've been doing this, for so long, and I feel like I'm doing it right. And because a lot of us boys, who, grow up with a single mom, where we felt like we had to protect our mom, we had to provide for our mom, taking on that role actually hurt us, and we were failing doing it. Can you hear me? All right. So we were failing doing it. So when we become men and we get with a broken daughter who becomes a strong woman, who again, we can't meet her expectations, so we get fed up, and which is why a lot of men end up leaving relationships because it's not peaceful for them. They tired of all the dramas and not being able to satisfy the woman. So they either leave altogether or they just get quiet in that relationship and just not say anything. So for strong women, when you have to do everything by yourself, first of all, you were broken as a daughter because you didn't have a father to protect you, right? Or you had to get into relationships with broken, with defeated boys who didn't know what it means to be, a healthy boy, or who thought that they were men. So they hurt the girls, and then the girl, pretty much become a strong woman, and that pretty much keep passing on generations after generation. So we keep having, the whole cycle over and over again of, strong women, defeated sons, broken daughters, and until we again realize this is what's happening. We are raising, hurtful kids who are gonna grow up and become, hurt adults. You know what I'm saying? So we have to change that. And I want to say something about, the young lady who was talking about, Lulu Bean is her name?
Yeah, Lulu Bean.
When she said men have to start speaking up. When you have a whole bunch of men who have been raised by women, a lot of them are afraid to speak up.
Right.
Because they don't want to hurt their mothers. Right. And a lot of men are afraid of women because they were raised by a mother You know what I'm saying? So you have a whole generation of men who are afraid of women, who are emotionally unbalanced, right? Because they didn't have, a masculine, logical side to balance the emotional side they were getting from their moms. So so the system is broken, and we have to be aware of that system so we can change it.
And just a quick addition to that, with men who are afraid to speak up. There are a lot of men right now in marriages that they know is over, and they are waiting for the woman to initiate.
Right.
And they are sitting there. They don't want to initiate it themselves, going back to the fear that you mentioned. So what they do, they sit there miserable, waiting for the woman to literally take half their stuff.
Yeah, and I think too. I think we have this culture of happy wife, happy life. The woman is always right. Like there's nothing for men. It's like we expected to be unhappy. You know what I'm saying? We're expected to make the woman happy. You know what I mean? And when it comes to men, it's like, well, you're just there. We just happen to be there. Because it was said that a man is supposed to be with a woman. But I don't think we understand the value that a man, a father has in a home in the Black community.
Well, there's a term that I created, guys. It's a clinical therapist. We call it behavior modification. But I created a term from a show that I did in the past called taxation without representation and the mental breaking of the American male, which has actually led to an exodus. And that exodus is occurring with shows like my show from the clinical perspective. But many men are more or less evaluating and self-appraising. And when you have women like Dr. O that are fair, and dear sisters like Lulu Bean, it's weird how women from traditional patriarchal culture see men versus women here in America. And Mark, you're correct. Roger, you're correct. And also Pete, you're correct. It's a negative form of social conditioning where a lot of our men have been more or less emasculated mentally. And see, many men have been conditioned to be what I call unconscious simps. And so the term that I created for the unconscious simp is more or less supplementing irrational male patterns. And so men more or less supplement or more or less give to good behavior. But what an unconscious simp does, he gives to women that don't deserve his power. Women only respect power and strength. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, a lot of our men have given their power away because they don't more or less set standards and parameters, and they don't set those standards and parameters because they've never seen strong traditional men. Dr. O, I want you to answer the question about Lulu, by Snubbles. Then Lulu Bean, I want to ask you the question: are American men weak, in your opinion?
I want to, and then I'm going to have to leave you guys. I want to answer that. Is this a real person? I almost think it's somebody trolling. This young lady, I don't know if she's young or old, but she asked, are men allowed to be constantly saved, knowing they constantly make the same mistakes? And I just kind of looked at that question. It just really kind of taken me back, because aren't Black men expected to constantly come in and rescue us as Black women when we have a bunch of bastard babies and stuff running around, and expect them to take care of them? Aren't black men constantly saving us from our own demons when we know that we're not up to par? And they come in and rescue us and give us everything that we need, and we can't even give a Black man a safe place. So absolutely, we come in and we save that Black man every single day of our life. Every single day it takes us to make him feel comfortable. We come in and we rescue him, because our Black men in this country accept us in all forms. They accept us fat. They accept us loud. They accept us belligerent. They accept us fighting. They accept us bald head. They accept us combative. They accept us smoking weed, rolling weed, dressing like prostitutes. So absolutely, we rescue the Black men every single chance we get. And when we fail, we go back and we apologize. That's what we do. And unfortunately, I do have to get off. But like I said, again, I want to shout out everybody in the manosphere. Shout out to Kevin Samuels. I love that brother. Shout out to my brother, Dennis Sperling. Everybody know I love Dennis Sperling. That's my big brother. I love Dennis. Eric, Eric, I think we finally know, brother, the fat meat is greasy. So shout out to BMO and all the brothers in the manosphere. It has been absolutely great, and I love you guys. And thank you again, brother, for having me on the panel. And I
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc. We're gonna have to get armed security for Doc because she's a 6 shooter from Texas. But I love that sister. But anyway, Doc, take care. We will see you again. Thank you for chiming in. But Lulu Bean, I'm gonna pose the question, and shout out to Alex Virtuous for the $10 super chat. Great conversation. Are American men weak, Lulu Bean, in your opinion?
Be honest.
Are you there, Lulu Bean? Lulu Bean, are you there? All right. I'll ask you the question, Mark.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you.
Oh, sorry. I think you muted me and I forgot to unmute myself. I'm so sorry.
Oh, I apologize. In your opinion, you're from South African culture, the powerful Zulus. Shaka Zulu was arguably one of the greatest warriors in the world. Are American men weak in your opinion?
I really want to be careful. I'm not trying to say, not to be PC, but when I was in Africa, I was really, I believed what I saw, I was down with the sisters and I thought the black man was the enemy and I believed everything until I landed. So I want you to understand that part. Even out there, black men are made to look a certain way until I came here, like I said, and I saw a sister lie and try to put her own brother in jail. I met men or people who had strippers in their families for no reason, who came from good homes, but they just wanted the easy way out. So I've seen the other side, and my mind was changed here. When I got here, it was a huge culture shock. I think I agree with the kosher clinician when I say I think a lot of it has got to do with the social conditioning of men. I've come across a lot of men who allow themselves to be abused and taken advantage of by women because they're trying not to be that black guy. So do you get what I'm trying to say? So they'll give a woman money and they'll allow themselves to be extorted for child support because they don't want to be called deadbeats. They don't want to be called absentee dads. They want access to their children. I've seen more than one man having trouble trying to see his child. So I don't want to say that Black American men are weak so much as I think they're fighting so many things. I think there's so many wars that they're fighting. That, like I said, they're fighting how people see them. They're fighting the women in their lives. The law's not on their side. So I can't say it's not all the way. Are they weak men? Yes. But for the most part, I think it's a difficult war. It's a difficult situation that men find themselves in. So I wouldn't go and call them weak.
Right. That's fair. That's a fair prose.
Yeah.
Mark, what's your take on what Lulu Bean said, please?
No, I have to agree with everything she said. I don't think men are necessarily weak. I think men are fearful living in America. And I think a lot of men, again, when you grow up with a mom, and even if you had a dad around, a lot of dads are just there, right? They don't have a voice. So the moms are pretty much in control. So you grow up that way. You learn to be fearful of women. You learn to be quiet. You learn, if you want to be a good man, you learn that the women, the woman is always right. So I think there's a fear factor when it comes to men in America, that we are afraid to either go to jail, and we're afraid to be a bad guy. So we kind of submit to a lot of the dysfunctions that women come with. Right. So it's I wouldn't say it's a weakness. I would say it's just some of the dysfunctions that we were brought up with, and we were we grew up seeing as sons, and from our moms. And from and when we start dating women again, a woman will call a cop on you. If you even say, I mean, I don't promote violence. It's not something I promote, but a lot of black women actually, somebody wrote that earlier, help the white supremacy
Mm-hmm.
by actually helping them put black men in prison. And even if you look at the 60s, when they a lot of black women put black men out. You know what I'm saying? Again, it's a deeper conversation, but when you look at that dynamic, so there is a reason for black men to be to fear the black woman, right? Because the black woman has always been told, well, you always right, if you're happy, everything is fine. The men have to make you happy. So there's a great level of dysfunction that we have to face and understand when it comes to the dynamic of black men and black women. If we want to change it, I
Can,
think black
can
women
I,
have to. Go ahead.
sorry to interrupt. I wanted to ask you, you guys, a question. On top of what we've discussed in terms of everything that men have to fight, I think one of the biggest thing is the pride of the black woman. Simple things like you get women who say they're in the manosphere. And I don't want to talk about people, but I mean, since she's a public figure, I'm going to talk about a Courtney, for instance, and a Kay, who I'm seeing now what's happening is they're getting women who've been invited into men's spaces. And I don't think they're necessarily coming with sincerity.
Right.
And they're bringing they're bringing, I'm going to call it, I don't have any other word except toxic femininity, where you have a Courtney saying, and I think she's part of the problem. Courtney has a child. She refuses to call herself a baby mama. She doesn't understand her own situation. So there are a lot of women, like these are the type of women that are calling into Kevin's show, who still want access to men, who are still mistreating men, but they don't see themselves. They don't see themselves as overweight. They don't see themselves as baby mamas that have got nothing else to give. You're still looking for a man, but you've given another man a baby and a legacy, and you want another man to take care of that. What are you bringing to that man?
Right.
So I think a lot of it is and I think it would account for more of the issues that men are having with women. It's just black women are refusing to see the trash that we are at times. Not all, before anyone comes at me, but we're responsible. Our pride has created a lot of dysfunction.
Yes,
Our toxic entitlement
right.
has created a lot of dysfunction. I saw Courtney wanting to argue with you. Oh, you're married to a black woman, but you had to say no. The issue is not being married to a black woman. The issue is being married to a woman who's taken on these Eurocentric westernized ideas. But then you'll say you're down for the black man. But everything you say and do and your ideas and your way of thinking, women aren't listening to men.
Right. Right. I agree with you, Lulu Bing, but I want to talk about that. I want to shout out to James Turner. We had to get back to our original basics: faith, family, nutritious foods. I understand that we are having these discussions. However, I wonder what God would say on how to deal with the man and women of today. Well, I'll say this: God told men to lead. He gave the man dominion, and men are more or less complicit. Some in their own complicit in their own demise, and some of them are not aware of it. But when you know better, you do better. And Lulu Bean, you posed a great question, because I know she challenged that, and she looked like she had a schema affliction. I don't have no issues with Courtney, but I'm very keen when it comes down to female nature. I understand that some women have nefarious agendas. Some are not as sincere as they say it, and I was sort of taken aback. Even though I respect the young lady, I have no issues with it. But but my logic was, if she wasn't black, why does it matter? I tell all black men to go where you're celebrated instead of being tolerated. And I'm going to tell you something, Lulu Bing. Some of these women had the options to get great men in their youth, but they more or less vanished their youth, or more or less relinquished their youth chasing after bad boys. And I agree with you. Now some want to get good men. But I just don't believe that some of these movements, the so-called femininity movement, some of it's gender. I believe it's a mirage. I'm not saying all of them, but I think a large majority of it is a mirage. Women learning the techniques of what men want, and only to pull the mask off once you say I do. What's your take on that? What's your take on that?
No, that's what I've seen. You know, there is that natural putting your best foot forward, but I think what culture does is that facade. That, you know, it's very hard to keep holding that facade because you've eventually got to go to a person's home. I was told that I could only bring one man home, and if it doesn't work, that's it. You know, they're not going to get used to another man and his family. He didn't have a man to represent, so his mother and his sister came over, um and he met my they met my husband's brother. So here there's just so much room for a woman to lie, you know. You can
Right.
you can hide behind money here. You can make yourself look like something you're not. Here, you can represent a false persona. There's just so much here to hide behind, and I think it's really, really hard. It takes such a lot of discernment for you to really see women, and like you know, everybody's got to kind of have this sort of sixth sense, like, you know, the way Kevin Samuel is able to strip away at that, because I think he's really gotten to know women, because he knows what a woman is supposed to speak like. You guys call it femininity, because I don't, you know, I just call it being a woman. You know,
Right.
why do you
Right.
have to use these terms in order for you to have respect, just because a man is a man and he is stronger than you? You
Right.
know, why do you, this thing, respect must be earned? What happened to just having respect for a person because they are a person?
I
Right.
agree. Yeah.
Right. Right.
So here there's so many prerequisites for men. I mean, how do you ask a man to prove he's a man? You know, that's the first thing I hear. Like, he got to prove he's a man, you know, he got to show me I can lead him. And it's like, but sweetie, what are you bringing to the table besides
Right.
what's between your legs?
But
Right.
yeah, I think
What
also, who taught you how to follow, right?
exactly?
You're not gonna recognize a leader if you never witness a leader, if you never know what leadership is. So
Exactly.
yeah, I think they're I don't want to blame anyone, but I think we all have work to do.
Definitely.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree. To the people that are listening, it's 41 that are listening. Please share this show with at least 5 people. Help me get to 2,000. And if you have not donated, please donate to dollar sign Cash App. Cash App 7 Smalls. Please donate to Cash App dollar sign 7 Smalls if you like the content. These shows are very time consuming, but I'm very fortunate to have the audience listening. And I look forward to serving brothers that have been more or less traumatized by not being respected. I want to ask you guys a question. We're going to sign off in a few minutes. This has been a great show. Starting with Mark, who was the mister in your life that was more or less perhaps a victim of trauma, but he was seen as a negative person? Who was the victim, the mister that you remember in your family, or you don't have to say the name, but who was the mister in your family that was actually seen as a negative person, but he really experienced trauma?
That's a good question. Phew. Um, I'd probably have to say my aunt's husband. You know, he tried to do the right thing, and he had a hard life. But when those things kind of come out in the abusive ways, and he was also a drinker, and we kind of just say he's just a bad person. You know what I mean? He's just a drunk or an abuser. But we negate the fact that he was abused as a child. You know what I mean? I think yeah, if I had to say something, I'd probably say him. And because of that, we kind of I don't want to say we, because I was a kid when those things were happening. But he was cast away from the family because of his behavior. And I think that's what a lot of us do in the Black community. We don't understand the trauma. So when somebody starts acting negatively, we we cast them out, right? We say, that person is just a bad person, and don't even try to help them. Don't even try to let them, just have a conversation and try to understand what really happened. And I think, a lot of parents do the same thing, right? When you're raising a child, if that child is hurting, you don't want to hear it. You know what I mean? Either you beat that child to submission, or to be quiet, or to not speak up. So we are using a lot of again, traditions from slavery. When the masters used to beat us into submission, when we couldn't look at the masters in the face, we couldn't say anything back. We couldn't talk back. A lot of our people are still doing the same thing, and I think that needs to change.
Right. Black girls getting their shit together. Dear, if you're on, please come on the panel. I want you to talk about the trauma that you've seen and why black men in America often, when they're traumatized, their trauma is given a negative connotation. Starting with you, Roger. Who was the mister in your family, and how was he demonized, in your opinion?
Oh, the mister of my family was definitely my mama. She's definitely the mister. Again, and you going back to what the gentleman said. It took me a while to understand that something happened to her, to my mother. It took me a while. For a long time, I thought she was just an evil, wicked witch of the West. And then I started realizing, wait a minute, you grew up with her grandmother, with her mother. You experienced some of her behavior. And then you started, and the only reason I think that I made it through on the other side is because I was a boy. I think that was the only saving factor. I don't think a female could tolerate. My mother wasn't built like that. So my mother was ostracized by me first. My brother, he has a different relationship where he kind of like ostracized her 1 minute and then loves her the next and then ostracize her. But again, I had to sit down and explain to them that like I said, we don't really know too much about our mother. We don't really ask too much questions. We just go through photo pictures and be like, who is this woman? I don't know anything. My mother, to me, she was born at 26 years old. That's all I know. I don't know anything besides that. And I don't ask no questions. She never volunteered no information. So really and truly, we don't know that woman. We don't know her. We don't know anything about her. And I think that is very common in black people's home. We don't truly know our parents. We don't know them.
Yeah, no, just to add something to that, I think it's really important because, like I said, when I started my own healing process, actually, before I wrote the book, I had to have a conversation with my mom. Because some of the things that I wanted to talk about, I wanted to face them. I wanted to understand them. And for me to understand who I was, I needed to understand her. You know what I mean? So I decided to have a conversation with her, and we both cried, and I learned about her history. I learned about the things that actually, broke her. And because of that, I learned to empathize with her and understand, her situation and the ways that she used to act. And I actually forgive her because of that, that conversation. So I think it's important, especially if you want to heal, if you want to understand who you are, you have to talk to your parents if you still have them. You have to try to have a conversation, because we're always going to have these, all these negative views of our parents when we don't understand them. You know what I mean? So I think it's important.
Right. Lulu Bean, if you can tackle this question. Snuggle said you talk about Eurocentric westernized ideas. What other ideas or what other thought processes are there in the world that people have? Can you please explain and give examples?
In terms of, for instance, the outside looking in at Black Americans, is simple things like feminism was never your fight. And a lot of what Black women have taken on is not something that comes from Black people. Twerking, that's not something that Black people were doing back in the day. Black people may not have had a name, may not have had a tribe, or may not have had a language, but you had your own cities that white people had to come out and destroy. You had your own educations. You had your own greats. So black African Americans, I don't even think you guys. I don't actually see you guys as African. I think you guys are indigenous to that country, and I think that they call you African to remove the fact that that's where you belong. But anyway, there's nothing else to call, so I'm going to call you that. Black Americans, rather, you had your own culture, but you've been made to believe that you didn't. But what you are now, what is being shown now, isn't who you are, isn't what you are. So just go back to what Kevin Samuel says. Who were your grandmothers and how did your grandmothers carry themselves? Who were your grandfathers and what did your grandfathers, how did they carry themselves? What skills did they have that you don't have?
Well, it's going to take the evolution, Lulu Bean. It might take a couple of generations, and I think that's why a lot of men are divesting. Shout out to Yaziz. Truth is strange to the mind that's conditioned by lies, and I agree with you 100%.
But let me push back on her, kosher clinician.
Right.
So this evolve. What did we evolve to do? This thinking that she's talking about, is it taking black men? Is it destroying the black man, destroying the black family? Is it the thinking now that black women have that's brought about the manosphere and that has brought about the voice of Kevin Samuels? Is that the thought process we're supposed to go with then?
So what's the question again, Lulu Bean?
The person you said was asking what other thought processes are we supposed to go by other than Eurocentric ideas?
Right.
And my argument is you never, when you go back into Black American history and who you were, you never had Eurocentric ideas. You had community. You had faith. You had
I see your
faith.
point. Right.
You get what I'm trying to say?
Right. I think Lulu Bean. I think it was an amalgamation of revised Afrocentric principles, more or less mixed in with, I would say, some Jim Crow concepts. But you're right. You know, when blacks looked at the Bible, they didn't see the gospel do what I call the slave master, but they saw it do liberation. And so that's where you got songs like Lift Every Voice and Sing. You know, most black folks in America at one time, you know, black people were married at a higher rate than anybody. But unfortunately, liberal policies have not only impacted black men, but also American conservative men, but it's impacted the country in a whole. And what I'm saying is that a lot of men are actually de-evolving. They're finding out what their worth is. I'm teaching them. The travel groups that we're part of, we're teaching them. And we're just giving men options. We're telling men that you have an inherent worth, you have an inherent value, and that you were not complicit in the policies that were more or less created. That a lot of women that said that we oppress black men and regular working class white men too, and some the working class other men, they didn't have the power to oppress anybody. But there was a few that did have that power, and with that power, they used those tools to subjugate men and women. And so, as I said earlier, they're divesting and they're looking for love, and they're finding love, the ones that can travel. And even though 5% of blacks have passports, they're looking for love. But you know what, Little Bean, you said something that was powerful. I created a term called people in America are Americans of the African diaspora, meaning our bloodline traces from many spectrums of the African continent. Like I'm 43% Nigerian. The other part of me is like Cameroon, Congo. I think it's like 20%. Then it goes to Ghana. It goes to Senegal, Mali, and then 5% British. And so we're from the African diaspora. They said, well, you're not African. Well, I said, fine. We'll say we are Americans from the African diaspora because our bloodlines transcend any other mixed, any other ethnic group from the different countries. So our bloodlines are from many different countries in Africa. So we're from the African diaspora. But Pete, who was the mister in your family? And what did it look like? Who was the mister in your family, and what did it look like? Unmute yourself, brother. I got you. Hold tight. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, Pete. All right, well, you figure it out. So, to the people that are listening, have anyone else been impacted by trauma? Who did you
Oh,
see?
sorry. Can you hear me now? Can
Yes,
you
sir.
hear me?
I can hear you, brother. Go ahead.
The Mr. in my family was an uncle-in-law. He had about 8 children, maybe, and of course, he was a heavy drinker. And my parents, I used to speak about him. I came from a home where French Creole was spoken. My mother is from the Francophone Caribbean, and like people from Haiti, Martinique, Dominica, Guadeloupe, St. Lucia, etc. That's what they speak. And especially when they think other people don't know what they're saying. For some reason, my mother taught me, I picked it up, so I knew what they were saying. And she and my father would be speaking about him. And I think it wasn't until I got much later that older that I realized what was going on with him. I felt that he got drunk and he would abuse his children. I've never seen him or known him to abuse my aunt, but he was extremely strict with the children. Until I heard a story from my mother that that one of my other uncles and him was working as men, and this other uncle married one of my other aunts, and he was kind of envious of this uncle, and said, "Oh my God, does she have a sister?" And of course, true enough, he ended up with my with my current aunt. But what happened is the other sister and his, the guy he worked with, they were doing well financially and otherwise, and he wasn't doing as well. And I think maybe that may have been a factor in his behavior. He might have felt that he let down, he didn't live up to his expectation. I don't know, but that's just my own surmise years later. But I know he had the character traits of a Mister, that stands out for me.
Right. Tom made a cut and said that our culture has always been negatively impacted by the dominant society. What we believe about ourselves is told to us by them in the movie, TV, and news program. And I agree with that 100%. You are correct. Yeah. There has been some negative programming, unfortunately, in our community. Go ahead, Pete.
Yeah. I wanted to address that too. I think one of the things we talk about is as if culture occurs in a vacuum. Like if we have this immutable thing called culture that's transfixed over time, and other things happen, and that just stays intact. But that is particularly not true, for example, in the case of the U.S. From what I know, up until the 60s, if you look at the way men dressed in the 40s and 50s, everybody was in suit and they wear their fedora hats or pork pie hats or whatever. Sure. And come the 60s, people start wearing jeans, right? They start wearing dungarees, as they used to call them back then. Those were considered work clothes. And so the whole culture, white guys start wearing their hair long, black guys start wearing afro, So what I'm saying is that there's a so-called political economy that is also occurring in the backdrop that is driving or affecting what we call culture today. If you look at the early days of rap, the kind of lyrics that was taking place, and you listen to music to give you a pulse of what's happening in society, you can see the transformation in Black America. Back in the 60s and 70s, the lyrics was black men and women serenading each other, well choreographed, well-dressed groups. Most of the people wore naturals. You look at the 90s and the early days, a lot of Afrocentric imagery and rap. And fast forward to today, starting with when, I don't know if many people here remember when Nelly had a song called Tip Drill that used to be played. You had to wait up until 2 a.m. if you wanted to see that on BET. And then all the women in the background were so-called video vixens. Now we have a change where the video vixens have come to the front. We'll be talking about Megan Thee Stallion and, and all of these people. They would be in the early 90s, they might have been the background dancers. So now we have them in front, and a complete shift and stuff that went on at the BET Awards that was shocking to me. I mean, we now have soft porn, or quite frankly, I've seen hard porn on Twitter. And there was, anybody can have a Twitter account. But I'm talking, let's take for BET since we're talking about the black situation. So how did this happen? Well, it happens because I think we don't have an enforcement mechanism in our culture, and so people just pay to the highest dollar. Whatever you pay me for, it's like somebody's Instagram model. They basically tell you what price they're willing to pay to do what in Dubai, and so some of our athletes and entertainers are willing to pay, do whatever is necessary to quote unquote secure the bag, because we seem not to have the ability to quote unquote punish them in a way to boycott their products. But the system is so perverse that I think even if we do, and I don't want to use the word white liberals, but it is what it is, would pay them to do nothing anyway. They'll buy their records. They'll do it just to promote that. They take a great pride in I think what it is, now that I'm speaking to you, this idea finally came to my mind. Here we are in 2021, and white people are still trying to justify slavery. And they do anything possible to present us in a negative light, as if to say, you see, we told you they were subhuman and it was okay to enslave them. I hate to say this, but at the end of the day, I can't think of another explanation. Because why is there this persistent, incessant, relentless, effort to present black people all over the world, not just here in the US, in the negative light possible? We go to Haiti, we don't present you pictures of the citadel, we present you pictures of the slum. We go to Africa, we present you the child with the fly, the tsetse fly. We don't show you the suburbs. It doesn't matter where you go. You go to Jamaica, they may show you a beach or something, but they don't show you the highly educated people. They don't show you that the oldest synagogue in the Western Hemisphere are in Jamaica. So I think there's still this need to justify why we were treated the way we were during slavery.
That you made some valid points. Guys, go check out my man Mark Montplaisir book. Tell them about your book again, Mark. I know you got to go in a minute.
Yes. Strong women, fed up men, defeated sons, broken daughters. I actually want to touch on what the brother said. You made so many great points. And when we look at the whole hip hop culture, right? That all started in the 70s and 80s. And it's partly because when you started having all these boys growing up with our fathers, they were hurt. So when you listen to hip hop, a lot of it is pretty much just people expressing their hurt and their pain. But we monetize it, right? We praise it, right? When you listen to the lyrics about shooting each other and hurting each other, people who actually look like you, but we glorify it. We pay for it. You know what I'm saying? So we have this culture of broken people, hurting people, right? Of people who are hurting, talking about their pain, but we think it's a good thing, right? We think it's entertainment, but it's pain. It's hurt. You know what I'm saying? So I think we have to acknowledge that. It doesn't mean that you don't. If you acknowledge that that the culture is actually causing harm to us, it doesn't mean that you don't love hip hop. You just don't agree with the message. You know what I'm saying? And I think a lot of us, again, this fear of offending someone, so we're afraid to speak out. We're afraid to speak up. You know what I mean? So just wanted to say that about what what the brother said. So again, I do have to run. So the name of the book is Strong Women, Fed Up Men, Defeated Sons, Broken Daughters. It's on Amazon. Thank you, Gail, for posting the link. You can also, if you want to get a signed copy, you can find it on my website, healingvibes.org. And check me out on Instagram, author Montplaisir. Check me out on Facebook. Definitely let's connect. I have some weekly videos I post about a lot of things we actually talk about tonight. So I was, I was pretty, I was honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
No doubt, no problem.
Definitely.
No doubt.
All
But
right, good
listen,
night.
right. So, Chaos Ring, unmute yourself, and then we're about to sign off in a minute. I want to get Lulu Bean's final point, and also Pete. But Chaos Ring, what do you want to add to this discussion about Mister and why Mister is often demonized in the American public? Are you there, Chaos Ring? Chaos Ring, unmute yourself. Okay, Chaos Ring. All right, Lulu Bean, what did you get from this discussion as we're about to leave in a few minutes? Anyone else want to come up and share their story, please do. It's about 32 minutes after the hour, 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. But Lulu Bean, what did you get out of this discussion about the mistering of the American black male?
I was thinking about your question about Mister, and I was saying in the comments that to me, every black American man is a Mister to me, because you've got to fight the stereotypes. You've got to fight not to become a victim. So either way, as a black man, regardless of whether you're successful or not, you have a fight on your hands. It just depends on how aware you are of it,
Right,
right. and how it affects you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the American black man has more power than he realizes. He truly is the prize. He always has been. And I find you guys very handsome, very, very beautiful.
Thank you, dear. Thank you. Well, let me ask you a question to the single men that are listening. What would they get if they went to Nigeria, or I mean not Nigeria, but South Africa to pursue a woman? What would they get in a South African woman?
Remember, we're different tribes, and as I said, when you go to South Africa, guys, it's westernized. You're not going to get that much of a culture shock. What I can tell you is, everybody and their mother has a bum, has an ass. Everybody there has a figure. It's hard not to come across a person without a figure. If you meet somebody, if you go there, go for a holiday, and go there with somebody that's been there, that can show you the ropes, that can show you where to go. My husband is American kosher clinician.
Okay.
I
Cool.
met him in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, I wanted him to also come on and give you his own perspective as a
Yeah,
man.
please tell him, come on, please do.
All right, here he is.
All right. Hello. Yes, you come on,
Yes.
sir. Please do. Mm-hmm. How you doing, sir?
No, I'm wonderful. I was
Anybody
doing
hear me?
some
I'm here now.
reading. So, okay, what am I supposed to be discussing?
Your perspective as a man.
Oh, okay. Oh, my perspective as a man in Africa. Of course, I grew up here in America, and when I went to Africa, that is a lot that I've learned traveling. And one thing I've learned growing up in the city communities is that Africa would teach a man how to teach a boy to be a man.
Right.
A lot of our ways would change. As a matter of fact, when you come back to America, you'll realize that us as black men in America, we do a lot of posturing. Posturing doesn't necessarily work in other countries that we call third world countries, because people will look at that and they play fool to catch wise, which means that they'll play into your tune and only to take advantage of you. And one thing about dealing with women, what I've learned overseas is that they actually, if you're not a man, you're not going to win relationship wise. It's not just you show up to a third world country and you get a better woman because the women of America mistreated you. Literally, the reason why we've been mistreated for a long time, to me, and this is from my own experience, is because we did not believe or think that we were allowed to be men,
Right.
and we were allowed to express ourselves the way that we needed to. It's
Right.
respected and accepted by women in Africa, in South America. I've traveled many places, been to Venezuela,
Mm-hmm.
been to Brazil, but I lived in the continent for 12 years, from Senegal down to Nigeria, and I lived in Zimbabwe and South Africa. So I've actually learned really kind of like how to kind of like become a man. I learned true humility. I learned that you know, you don't have to when it comes down to a disagreement, you don't have to get physical. That being a man does not mean that you have to show your brute strength. And all of these qualities. I remember the first time I went to Africa and I was in a club. I was in Zimbabwe, and I was with a few women. And the first time I tried to show myself to be tough, it's like they all were unattracted to it. And that's when I learned, oh, so posturing and acting like you have a big chest doesn't work.
Right.
So, you know, and it's just, it's nuances, but it's a lot. But I know one thing, that once you actually learn to become a man, once you actually learn how to be who you are at your center, then women, they'll accept you for who you are. And then one thing I learned that's great about the difference between American women and African women, very simply, is that you have to, they expect to be pedestalized. Whereas in Africa, they expect to pedestalize their man.
Right.
They want their man to be the authority. They want to be the ones bragging about the fact that they have a man. And it has nothing to do with the amount of money you have, the type of job, status,
Right.
per se. It doesn't mean you have to be weak in those areas. But yeah, it's a lot to it. I don't even know what the question was, but I hope I just didn't ramble.
Well,
oh, what can you expect in South Africa?
right. Your wife is from South Africa. You met your Lulu Bean.
Yeah.
What did you get out of your wife that you didn't get in American women when you were dating?
Oh man.
He's an old man.
Number one thing is I have to tell you this. I used to think that when I was in America with an American woman that I had an Eric Benet problem, right? But now when you go into Africa, you have to strengthen that. You have to strengthen your manhood. You got to eat enough avocados, because they have a system where it's like, no, I'm gonna make sure that when you leave today, you're coming back home, and that you're not going to be in a position where you can get excited about another woman. So the women, it's a whole different ball game. So what you can expect out of a woman from South Africa, you're going to get humility.
Right.
You're going to get, like, for instance, I was watching the show yesterday, and they were talking about when a man and a woman works. In South Africa, it's surprisingly, most women own their homes and make a lot of money, whereas the men, they don't. So women generally kind of like make money for the family. So I know, like, where Lulu's from, she's from the Eastern Cape. She's a Xhosa woman, right? They have a thing among Xhosa women where it's like, you find a man, and then everything that you have, financially, everything, you put all of it into a man until he comes into a position to where he can take care of you. Then you don't have to work anymore like that, per se.
Right.
You know? So
right.
That's the tradition. So, that was different going into South Africa, seeing women actually, taking on a supportive stress, not a provider stress, but a supportive stress.
Right.
Right. And a lot of women look at the supportive stress as if they're providing for a man, but that's a whole different ball game. So it's like, when a hunter went out to get the meat, the women knew that she had to work the field to make sure that the vegetables was on the plate. When a man went out to get the skins, the women knew that after he brought the skins home, that she had to clean it off and sew it together. So it's almost like, he provided, but she also supported whatever he provided. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's deep.
I know, Mr. Bean. Let me ask you a question, Mr. Bean. What did you see as a mister in your family, and do you think that person suffered from unresolved mental illness, perhaps in the form of post-traumatic stress disorder? Who was the mister in your family? Because I pose the question, Mr. Bean, anytime we talk about, American men, but especially American black men, we tend to point to mister. And I call it the mistering of the American male.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who would you say, Mr. Bean, was the mister in your family? And why do you think American men are demonized in that context?
The mister, if I understand where you come, hopefully I don't go off the track, because, I wasn't Yeah, hopefully I
So,
don't go
so,
off the
so, so
track.
basically, if you look at Mister from The Color Purple, he's seen as a very violent and a very angry and a man that hates, women or black women or women in general. What I'm asking you, the question is, if you can answer it. If you can't answer, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But who was the Mister in your family? The question would more or less ask, was Mister a victim of post-traumatic stress disorder? That's why he more or less exhibited some of the behaviors that he did. That's the question.
That's interesting that you asked that question. I don't necessarily know a Mister like that, but I do know the errors of my father to a certain extent.
Hmm.
But I can't speak negatively about my father because his shoes is one that I still have to fulfill,
Right.
and even in my path in life. But I don't know. But post traumatic stress, I remember my father's generation. That was the first one where um, he grew up. He had to be raised by his uncle because when his father left his mother, um, and I know that he was affected by that. But I know my father was married for more than 27 years to my mother, and I mean they produced 10 children. But of course, later he did what his father did, left my mother and did what he did. But I don't know any misters like that per se in my life like that. Not per
Okay.
se. I don't know
Okay.
any misters.
Okay. Black girls getting their shit together. If you want to, dear, please come on and share your story. We have a very diverse panel. We have Lulu Bean, who's from South Africa. We have my man Pete Charles. We have my man, Roger, who's Panamanian American, and I believe Chaos Ring is Jamaican. He sounds Jamaican. But black girls getting their shit together. If you're there, please pop on for a few minutes. We're about to sign off. And so, if there anyone else that want to share their story, Chaos Ring, I see you still mute. Are you there, sir? Chaos Ring, are you there, sir? Chaos Ring, like he fell asleep.
Hello?
Yes. So Chaos Ring, what's
Step
your
away from a
take?
second off the thing.
Right.
What miss?
So what's your take about the mistering of the American black male? Who was the mister in your family, and why is there such a negative connotation as it relates to mister?
I can't remember watching that movie. I've been hearing about this lately around this space for some time now, or from content creators about this man named the Mister. And I'm thinking, is this what abusive black man that's beating on black women and holding her to her will or some shit? That's the question. Mister.
It's a character. He's a character in The Color Purple, in the movie Color Purple.
Okay. I had to watch Color Purple to really get a more glimpse, but I'll say this. To revert back, I did heard a question earlier about is the black man weak earlier. I'm gonna expound on that shortly. In my opinion, I would say yes. Here's why. Because he has not developed the will to say no to his girlfriend or his wife counterpart. And because you refuse to say that, they hold more power. From what I understand, my knowledge. And I use the word no very loosely. Enough. And trust me, it's very effective. And I think most men don't think it's a powerful tool because they feel there's going to be a backlash. There's going to be some punishment, hurt. And that's your training. And that's what they expect, that you don't have the strength as a man to say no and just get up and walk off. And I see the Gen Zs are going to be these set of men that's going to have the strength to say not only no, but walk off. Because they're watching and learning from experience from other men, whether we know it or not. Hell, they listen to content and understand what men are doing wrong in regards to dealing with a group of women or any woman generally. So I must be honest and give you the straight honesty of that answer. Now I know the woman didn't want to tell the men on this panel, any man, because like I said, honesty is not really fun to certain men, but it's necessity for us to move forward, and we can handle it. You get me?
Right. No doubt. Respect.
No.
Guys, if you like what I'm doing, please donate to Cash App, $7small. I love what I'm doing. I love empowering the people on the panel. These topics are very necessary. Now, we could talk about salaciousness. We can talk about drama. We can talk about a lot of unnecessary things, but it's vital that we talk about mental health. Black girls getting their shit together, dear. We've had conversations. I was on your panel. Go subscribe to my girl, Black Girls Getting Their Shit Together. She talks about a lot of pertinent information. My man Roger on the bike, subscribe to his channel. But Black Girls Getting Their Shit Together, why is there such a negative demonization of Mr.? And more or less, was it more or less posed that perhaps Mr. had an undiagnosed mental illness, such as post-traumatic stress disorder? What's your take on the conversation? Black Girls Getting Their Shit Together.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am, I can.
Okay. Hello, everyone on the panel and listeners. So I will admit, I have never seen The Color Purple. Do not take my black card. However, I'm just putting that out there now. But from getting the context of what everyone is saying, I agree that Mr. has definitely suffered some post-traumatic stress. My father is definitely a Mr.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm listening to the stream, I realized his father is definitely a Mr.
Yes, ma'am. Right. You see where I'm going at, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and now I'm peeling back more layers, and I remember my grandfather saying his father was a Mr.
Right. And so a lot of times, Black girls getting their shit together, we tend to demonize the man as, or more or less call it toxic masculinity. But a lot of times it wasn't that. Mr. went through trauma. He saw his mom get raped. He saw his grandfather get hung. He saw strange fruit hanging from the sycamore tree. But we don't talk about Mr.'s pain. We don't care about what Mr. went through. The first thing we go do is the default mechanism that he's a toxic man.
But
why is that? Why is that?
I feel that if someone has not gone through any of their self-healing, because I've been that person where my father is wicked, he's evil, my grandfather is just like him times 20, but until I've done my own self-work and gone through therapy, I now see my father as an 80-year-old, 12-year-old, or a 12-year-old in an 80-year-old man's body.
Right.
And his outbursts and his rage, that's just his trauma speaking, but I couldn't see that. So before I was having rage towards him, and I made a conscious effort, I'm not going to let this generational trauma trickle down into me. And then with my kids, it had to stop.
Right.
So with that being said, I believe when you have some self-awareness, you actually can have empathy. It doesn't absolve them or any of the abusers from their abuse that they have shared, but you actually start having empathy for them. And that comes with the forgiveness.
Right.
And just to let people know, forgiveness doesn't mean you have to still sit at the family dinners during Thanksgiving. You can love from afar and not feel guilty about it.
Right.
Self-preservation is the first order of nature.
No doubt. I guess what my question is, and I want you to answer this if you can. Monique, when she played in Precious, she was given more sympathy, in my opinion, but Mr. was demonized. Why don't we see Mr.'s trauma as relevant as Monique's trauma? We tend to demonize the American man for his trauma and call it toxic masculinity, but when women like Monique and others were more or less, as art imitate life in certain movies, they were actually given a pass. That's my question. And that's my question. Mm-hmm.
Well, again, I haven't seen that movie. I'm not really a movie person.
Okay.
But I have heard.
I'll give you a pass.
Thank you. But I have heard how toxic and dark that movie was. Right. I see toxic as toxic. I don't care if you're a man or a woman. It is what it is. That's for me. Other people may disagree, but I don't absolve anyone from the toxicity that they share. That's just my thought process. But obviously, it doesn't seem to be that way from listening to everyone.
All right, my man Marvin Walker, how you doing, sir? Unmute yourself, brother. All right. What do you want to add to the conversation about the mistering of the American black man, and why a lot of times when black men go through their traumas or pathologies, they are often demonized instead of seeing it did the contextual framework of perhaps he was traumatized?
Okay, so I'm gonna be honest. I also haven't seen The Color Purple before. So
Oh man, y'all
uh,
Zennials. Y'all
yeah,
Zennials. Man, we're gonna put y'all in the trash can. Y'all Zennials, man. Go ahead, man.
but I definitely do think I think because who originally inspired me to call in was listening to the brother on the bike, listening to him tell his story about his mom, and it reminded me of my experience growing up. I had the same experiences with my mom, and I kind of see that us as black men, we get put in these, especially us that's raised by single mothers, we get put in these boxes that we can't leave outside of, and we'll get beat if we get outside of it. And then, when we grow older, we end up developing the same trauma that our parents had and giving it,
Right, right,
to our children. So
right, right. Well, I'm gonna tell you, young man, you have value, you have worth. If you're not getting your needs met here, get your passport ready, man. The passport game is powerful, man. I'm part of BMO, and we are celebrating, telling young men to go where they're celebrating instead of being tolerated. We know there are some decent sisters that want good black men, or men in general, or American women in general. So shout out to the good women. But to the ones that are not cooperating or respecting you and giving you what you want, you will be celebrated as a celebrity in other countries. In other countries, you're not seen as a black man, you're seen as an American. And you're given extra status. I'm going to be in the movie Frustrated 3 with Brother Al Grease. And I saw it firsthand. So I went to Brazil to actually do the movie Frustrated 3. And so there's greater over yonder if you hold the fort down and work hard now. Anybody else want to come on? If not, we're going to sign off. This has been a great show. But I wanted to bring this show and talk about Mr. because, Mr. was always seen as the bad guy. And I think people never considered that Mr. perhaps had undiagnosed mental illness that needed to be addressed. And I think because of that, we have to talk about the mental illness that a lot of black men actually have gone through or more or less go through. And that's why I posed the question. So anyone else want to more or less talk? Lulu B, did you have any final points before we sign off? And Roger?
Yeah, I was going to add to something. One of the things that caught my attention of your channel was simply that you were a black clinician. You don't get to see that. You don't get to see that often.
Right.
And the gentleman who just from Haiti, he said it best. If you are raised by a single mama, it's a high probability, almost 100% certain that if something is wrong with you, you're broken.
Right.
And I encourage, especially now that you're the first black clinician I've ever seen, really, literally.
Right.
And I always tell people, don't waste your time speaking to no white woman. They're not going to help you. You need to speak to somebody who understands where you're coming from. And for black folks, only somebody who looks like you is going to understand.
Well, I'll say this. I'll say this. I want to be fair because I don't want to. And Roger, thank you. Thank you for your kind words and your donation. Thank you. I'm not going to say that there are not some white clinicians that can't help black people. I'm not going to necessarily say that, but I do understand where you're coming from. Holistically and comprehensively, you're correct. A lot of times they don't understand our issues. And you're right to the point, Roger, that many are more or less trained through what's called the feminist theory lens. So on that perspective, you're correct. But if they are culturally competent and they're willing to understand the plights of black men, it's possible that they can understand you in part. But I will say this, they will not understand you in whole like myself, because I, as a black man, have more or less been demonized at times. I'm 6'5", 6'6", bald-headed, got the voice of Zeus. And so I've been through a lot of things myself. I've had to traverse through a lot of trauma and pain to overcome the obstacles that I'm overcoming. I lost jobs because, I am a big guy. But I decided to be a clinician back in 2009, and instead of taking that trauma that I went through and turning into something bad, I decided to turn it into something good. And in the clinical world, we call it sublimation. So I decided to take this channel to empower not only black men, but all men, and to help give them resources and resolve to deal with the pain that they're dealing with. And guys, if you like what I'm doing, please inbox me at kosherclinician@gmail.com. Please inbox me at kosherclinician@gmail.com. Forgive me for the technical issues. I have new equipment. You know, I paid a lot of money for this equipment, so you're gonna hear the nasty sound effects. Y'all gonna hear Barry White in a couple more days. So get ready, get them coins ready. You're gonna hear Barry White, and so you know, I love what I'm doing. I love the crew. You guys have been awesome. I love the communication, and this channel can go far. Guys, please share this channel. These shows are very time consuming. It's a therapy. Sometimes I'm on all night putting these shows together. Sometimes exhausted putting these shows together. And to the people that support it, if you don't have any money to share, please share the content. Go check out Black Girls Getting Their Shit Together. My channel is not that big, but go check that sister out. Help her grow her channel. She has some pertinent information with information that's pertinent to mental health. Go check out Roger on the bike. He has a fitness channel because fitness and mental health is important. And actually, Black Girls Getting Their Shit Together, you know, I got the concept from her about the countdown time. So shout out to her, but I had to create my own. But I love that sister. She's a sweet girl, lady. So anyone else want to come on real quick before we sign off? Pete, do you have any closing remarks? Chaos Rain, Marvin, we're about to sign off. Lulu, do you have
I would like to ask one particular question. Since we're up here talking about
I just wanted to say thank you for having me on, and I appreciate your time and I appreciate the work you do.
Right. No, I appreciate it, young brother. Look, Marvin, I want to ask you this question real quick, and then Chaos, you can come back on. You know, were you raised in an intact black home, or were you raised in a single parent home?
A single parent.
Right. How do you think that impacted you in a negative way, brother?
I think my mom, she was always so aggressive. You know what I'm saying? I think women, they have to pick up, when they have a single parent home, they have to pick up the role of the male. And I feel like, you know, women end up becoming far more aggressive than they need to be and not showing the love that they needed to show. So I feel like it left me a little void, you know what I'm saying? Not able to properly express my emotions that I would have.
No doubt. Mr. Stewart said that trauma is no excuse. You gotta have to want to heal and want to better. He said trauma is no excuse. You have to want to heal and want better than your. I agree with that, Mr. Stewart. That's true, but I think you also got to address that trauma actually happened. But I do agree with you that you got to want to heal. I agree with that. I'm not going to use trauma as the only solvent, or more or less the only element to pain. But first, you got to identify it, and when you know better, you do better. And once you do better, you work towards overcoming those pathologies. So anyone else? Lulu Bing, I love your insight there. I love your the insight that you bring. Any closing comments before we sign off?
Yeah, she put me on here because I think she had to do something, but she told me that she wanted me to say something.
Okay, all right.
Whatever comes to my mind. So
okay, go ahead, Mr. Bing. Go ahead.
And just in listening for like the last 10 minutes, in general, I have to say this, that whoever we allow to formulate our character actually controls our destiny.
Yes, sir.
And in saying that, a lot of things that we take in, our identities, how we perceive ourselves, all of these things were created. These are mindsets, and we have to challenge all of these mindsets and not be enslaved to it, because it is these mindsets that's going to maintain our condition, you know, even to the point to where, like, you know, I grew up listening to hip hop and rap, but at the same time, I understand that they pay fools to be class clowns on TV, and they put a lot of money and jewels around them. And then the negative aspects, we pick that up more than the positive aspects. We always like to say, oh, there's some positive to it. But, you know, if for those who ascribe to the biblical perspective, I mean, that tree of knowledge had good and evil a part of it, and it turned out bad.
Right.
You know, because you can't. It was too double-minded. And so the reality is that we have to be careful of if they can change an image of a God in the minds of our great parents, our great grandparents who believed in a white image of God when they were black. What else can they put into our mind to change our character if they were able to change the character of a God? You know, and so, you know, we just have to we have to be strong. We have to be wise, and we have to challenge all of these stereotypes, all these mentalities, and getting down to the root of it, the bottom of it. We have to challenge what a woman defines and designs what a man is to her, and try not to live according to that. Because if we are defined by her design of a man will never be men.
Right, right. That's powerful, man. And you know, and that's why I'm doing these shows to mentor young men like Marvin Walker, so that he won't be an unconscious simp. We don't want any unconscious simps, because a lot of these young men are unconscious simp. And then for the older men like yourself and I, Mr. Lulu Bean, we don't want to be conscious simps, you know. And so I agree with you. I think everything you're saying makes a lot of sense. These shows are important because mental health matters. And I said we can talk about anything, but if the mind is not strong, whatever a man think, that's what he is. And so, you know, we got to change that schema affliction that a lot of our children have. So, so anyone else want to comment about the sign off? It's about 1 minute after the hour of 11 o'clock. This show is going 3 hours. Time go by fast. I got some more good content coming up, guys. I got a show coming out. You guys are going to like it. Go check out my girl Black Girls Getting Their Shit Together. Go check it out. You guys will love that show. And we're about to sign off. I'm going to play a part of that video that I played earlier, and it was talking about strange fruit. It's dark. The original one was dark, but we're going to look at a few clips of that, and we're going to be signing off. Be good. Love you guys. Be well.
One thing.
Did you say something? Someone say anything?
Yeah. Can you stay up at the show end for 2 minutes every time, Coach?
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, man. Go ahead, brother.
All right, no. After the show, when the show ends.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. All right. Let me sign everybody off. Hold tight. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to the channel, share the content. Pete, thank you for your insight. I love your insight, brother. I love hearing from the elders. It's good to hear from brothers like you, Pete. You had a lot of insight. You're an intelligent brother. So let me remove everyone, and we're going to sign off.
4 in the morning. You got me up all cause you need to talk. To 4 in the evening. Wanna break up, say that you've had enough. I'm tired of talking again